Chapter 11:22. Lin Sun's words shocked everyone present. By the time he finished speaking, he had already charged forward. "You want to defeat me? Impossible!" Chu Zhongtian roared. His whole body glowed, and his aura became much stronger. His blood was boiling as if an ancient beast was awakening in his body. Many people were shocked. How did he suddenly become stronger? "There's a power sealed in his body, and it's been released now," an old man murmured, seeing through the mystery. The power of the seal. Everyone gasped. Was this Chu Zhongtian's real trump card? Boom! The thunder spear swept through the air, and the sky collapsed, instantly dissolving Lin Sun's attack. This is too terrifying. Many people felt their scalps tingle. Chu Zhongtian had not only become stronger, but too strong. He was like a different person from before. Lin Sun also felt great pressure. His expression turned serious, but he was still fearless. He met the attack head-on. It was as if there was a turbulence in the sky, drowned by violent and shocking fluctuations. The light was dazzling. "I originally wanted to reveal this in the Great World Competition, but you can force me to use it now. You can die without regrets." Every inch of Chu Zhongtian's skin was gushing with golden light, like the sun in the sky. The thunder blade wings behind him flapped, and the spear in his hand burst with dazzling arcs of lightning. His attacks were swift and fierce. "Look, Demon Lin is dodging. He doesn't dare to take it head-on. Chu Zhongtian has gone all out. He's really brave and unstoppable." People were shocked and in disbelief. Lin Sun was indeed dodging. It wasn't that he couldn't beat Chu Zhongtian, but that he felt Chu Zhongtian's aura was strange. It looked powerful but couldn't last long. It was like a desperate attack that stimulated one's potential. When the potential was exhausted, one was destined to decline. This was similar to Yazi's wrath. Although Yazi's wrath consumed a lot of one's experience, it could last a long battle. It was obviously better. Sure enough, as time went by, Chu Zhongtian seemed to be extremely powerful, but Lin Sun still keenly sensed that his power was declining. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun broke out. Different shapes of the word, tribulation, appeared around him. Each of them seemed to be made of the essence of the Great Way. They shone brightly, and the roar of the dragon resounded through the world. Then, it charged towards Chu Zhongtian. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. This level of secret technique was like the descent of a great calamity, as if it was carrying out punishment on behalf of the heavens, and it intended to annihilate all that stood in its way. It was too blazing and terrifying. The boundless heavens and the earth were filled with the word tribulation, and dragon roars resounded without end as if the sky was on the verge of collapse. Chu Zhongtian brandished his spear to defend with all his might. However, his expression was constantly changing, and his body was also trembling, as if he was under tremendous pressure. Bang! A strange word that looked like it was written by an earthworm burst out with the profound power of barbarian strike, forcibly tearing Chu Zhongtian's hand between his thumb and index finger. The spear buzzed and flew out of his hand. Bang! A tribulation character condensed from wedge-shaped patterns descended, displaying the might of the Swan Ni imprint. It smashed Chu Zhongtian's shoulder into pieces. Blood sprayed out, and even his body sank. If it wasn't for the golden armor that appeared and protected his body, half of his body would have been smashed to smithereens. Even so, his shoulder was badly mangled and heavily injured. "Ah!" Chu Zhongtian roared. His long hair danced in the wind and his eyes turned red. He was unable to accept all of this. He'd just come out from his closed-door cultivation and felt that he would be able to rise in the world to become a king, yet never had he imagined that he would suffer such a heavy setback just from dealing with the first-ranked minor overlord of this generation. This blow was too great. Slash! At this moment, Lin Sun had already transformed into a ray of light that shook the sky. He stretched out his hand and grabbed, causing divine radiance to transform into a blade that charged over with extreme speed and slashed down from above. This strike could be said to have been executed without holding back at all. Lin Sun's essence, energy, and spirit were poured into it, causing its destructive force to rise explosively, and it executed the profundities of the life and destruction slash. One had to admit that Chu Zhongtian was extremely formidable. At this critical moment, he'd completely ignited his potential to resist this strike, but it was in vain in the end. The blade condensed from divine radiance emanated the profundities of life and destruction, and it broke through Chu Zhongtian's defenses inch by inch and caused the armor on his body to shatter apart. Everyone exclaimed with shock while their hearts rose to their throats, and they were extremely nervous. Pop! The space between Chu Zhongtian's brows split open, and a wisp of captivating red appeared. His pupils constricted abruptly as he let out a furious roar, and he exerted all his strength to resist while swiftly retreating explosively. However, Lin Sun's blade was like a maggot attached to the bone, and it pressed down on him tightly, causing his forehead to show signs of cracking while his skin was already pierced through. Blood flowed down his face, causing him to seem extremely hideous. This blade chi was too swift, fierce, and all-powerful. It intended to slash open Chu Zhongtian's head and sever his soul. Bang! However, right at this critical moment, a dazzling ray of light flashed out, and it carried Chu Zhongtian to the distance. He'd definitely overcome this calamity. Everyone was astounded and caught off guard. I knew it. Since you brought 2 old dogs with you, it's impossible for you to not interfere in this matter. Lin Sun seemed to have expected this, and his black eyes were like bolts of lightning as he gazed at the 2 old men at the king realm by the side of the carriage. Young man, it's not good to be too hot-tempered. You lack poise and cultivation, and it's not beneficial to your growth. An emaciated old man's body was suffused with divine light of the way of kings as he stood there, and he looked coldly at Lin Sun with an indifferent expression. The other old man helped Chu Zhongtian into the carriage and carefully protected him. Seeing this, all the people watching the battle in the distance frowned and secretly scolded the 2 old guys for being nosy. Obviously, they couldn't afford to lose. An old man who doesn't die is a thief. Do you think you're qualified to teach me a lesson? I might as well tell you that if I wanted to kill Chu Zhongtian before, I didn't have to wait until now. It's just that you 2 old dogs are too much of an eyesore, so I have to guard against you. Lin Sun sneered, but his black eyes were cold. Now it seems that I'm right to be careful. Don't you feel ashamed to intervene in the fight between peers? He didn't lie. If he had used the broken blade before, he would have killed Chu Zhongtian. The reason why he reserved it was nothing more than to be vigilant against the 2 old men at the king realm. Young man, if you're too rigid, it's easy to break. We respect the saintess behind you, not you. The emaciated old man exuded coldness all over his body and his eyes were cold. If I want to deal with you, do you think you can still stand and talk to me? Bah! You're so shameless. You lost. Don't deny it. Do you want the whole world to look down on your heaven's pivot holy land? Suddenly, a rough scolding sounded. Then, the tall and majestic figure of Ah Lu appeared, carrying a giant wrought iron stick, squinting at the emaciated old man with a contemptuous face. Lin Sun was stunned. Why did this guy come here? Elder brother, I'm here to cheer for you today. I believe that all the people present will also look down on this despicable behavior. Ah Lu gave full play to his talent in talking, full of vigor and spittle flying. Everyone in the field was silent and no one responded. Obviously, no one wanted to offend the heavens pivot holy land. But in their hearts, they felt that Ah Lu's scolding was very satisfying. This time, the heavens pivot holy land was really unreasonable. The emaciated old man smiled faintly and ignored Ah Lu. Instead, he looked at Lin Sun and said, "Young man, I advise you to be careful. The great era is coming. At that time, I'm afraid that the saintess behind you can no longer protect you." Are you threatening me? Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep and cold. No, I'm just reminding you not to underestimate any orthodoxy. You can't estimate the strength of any orthodoxy that can survive from the ancient times to the present. It's easy for them to kill you, the emaciated old man said lightly. Of course, he only dared to say so. He didn't dare to do anything to Lin for fear of provoking the mysterious woman. If he dared to disobey the rules, the consequences were bound to be serious. Shameless old man, you only know how to threaten. Can you not be so shameless? Alu shouted in the distance. Shut up. No matter how good-tempered the emaciated old man was, he was irritated by Alu. His face darkened, and an invisible pressure emanated from his body, pressing towards Alu. Unexpectedly, Alu grinned and suddenly waved the giant wrought iron stick on his shoulder. His figure rushed up and smashed towards the emaciated old man. At first, the emaciated old man was disdainful, but when the stick smashed towards him, his face suddenly changed. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped it with all his strength. Boom! A scene that caused everyone to be astounded appeared. The withered old man was actually smashed flying by a single strike of the rod, and he fell over 30 m away with a thump, causing him to be in an extremely sorry state. Alu, on the other hand, was unscathed. Everyone present was shocked. Wasn't this barbarian too tough? Only Lin Sun was calm. It was also here that Su'er of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure had launched a sneak attack on him, but she was sent flying by Alu's stick. After all, Su'er was a king who had stepped into the immortal realm. The emaciated old man in front of them was not even as powerful as Su'er, but he still dared to provoke Alu. It was his bad luck. Shameless old dog, trash, and a disgrace. Alu reprimanded triumphantly. A holy treasure? The emaciated old man got up with a livid face. He had already seen that the giant stick in Alu's hand was an extremely terrible holy treasure. Which orthodoxy are you from? Are you planning to court disaster? The emaciated old man's voice was full of killing intent. Damn you! I'll beat you to death! Alu was immediately annoyed. He roared and dashed over with his giant stick. He was like a tornado, violent, ferocious, and ferocious. Let's go. On the other side, a king drove a purple-gold carriage and rose into the air. He called for the emaciated old man to follow him. Obviously, he realized that the situation was not good. I'll kill you next time, you little bastard. The emaciated old man glared at Alu, who was dashing over, and was about to leave after saying these harsh words. Did I say you could leave? But at this moment, Lin Sun's cold voice rang in his ears. Then, a dreamy, dazzling starlight appeared in his field of vision, descending from the sky. Oh no! The emaciated old man completely panicked. He sensed that this was the restrictive power of the star chess sea, and he was so shocked that his soul almost flew out of his body. How could he not know that Lin Sun had relied on this power to kill all the kings here? Boom! He used almost all his strength, pushing his cultivation to the limit, and dashed toward the void in the distance. At the same time, he took out a spiritual sword to block the starlight that enveloped him. P.S. Here's the 4th update. I don't believe there will be 5 updates today. Goldfish said that she wouldn't back down tonight. She would make the 5th update even if she had to stay up all night. But it's going to be very late. Everyone can watch it tomorrow after they wake up. Chapter 11:23. In an instant, the spiritual sword was enveloped by the starlight. The sword was corroded and then destroyed. At the same time, a long saber formed by the starlight swept out. Like a guillotine, it easily chopped at the skinny old man. Puff! The old man's body suddenly exploded. However, his primordial spirit had escaped from his shell a step earlier and avoided this calamity. In an instant, he had already vanished without a trace. His incomparably furious roar still echoed in the air. Everyone present felt their hair stand on end when they saw this scene. They were extremely shocked. A powerful king had his body destroyed so easily. If he hadn't escaped in time, his body and soul might have been destroyed. It was the first time for many people to see Lin Sun use the power of the star chess sea, so it was easy to imagine how shocked they were. Then, the crowd went into an uproar. They looked at Lin Sun differently. He was a demon. Even someone as powerful as Chu Zhongtian was defeated by him and almost lost his life. In the face of a king's disdain, Lin Sun showed no fear. He even fought back forcefully, causing the opponent's primordial spirit to escape from his body. Many people present were amazed. Although he had been silent for a month, Demon Lin was still the same Demon Lin. He was powerful, arrogant, and invincible. Big brother, you should have killed those two old beasts first and then dealt with Chu Zhongtian. That way, you could have wiped them out in one go and won beautifully. Alu returned with his giant wrought iron rod and said in a low voice, "Wiped out in one go?" Lin Sun's lips twitched. He didn't expect this guy to be more black-hearted than him. "Let's not talk about this. Why are you here?" Lin Sun asked. "Big brother is in trouble. How can I not come to help?" Alu said solemnly. Lin Sun sighed. "Alu, don't call me big brother." This guy looked old and rugged. Who could imagine that he was only 19 years old? If people saw him calling him big brother, they would think that he was older than him. "No, you are my big brother. Moreover, the old bastard said that I should follow you in the future. He said that when the great era comes, we brothers can work together and defeat all the talents in the world. We can rule the world and live a carefree life." Alu's voice was loud and he sounded like a bandit. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd in the distance. He quickly called out to Alu and headed into the depths of the star chess sea. This fellow had no filter on his mouth. If some of his words that were obviously boastful were to spread out, who knew what kind of rumors would spread out? Just as Lin Sun expected, news of this battle still spread. It caused an uproar and spread to all the great orthodoxies. For a time, it was unknown how many people paid attention to it. Chu Zhongtian's strength was known to the world, but he had still been defeated. He had nearly been killed by fiend god Lin. It was very shocking. Many orthodoxies began to re-evaluate Lin Sun's combat strength, thinking that he should already possess the combat strength of a peerless giant, or even stronger. Later on, there were even many absolute figures who appeared out of nowhere who declared that they wanted to head to the sea of star chess to suppress Lin Sun and prove their strength. However, this news was soon covered up. As the great era was coming, too many sensational events were happening in the ancient Desolation territory every day. The most shocking was a young man by the name of Qi Lingxiao. He came from an ancient clan and had been silent for 10,000 years. Now that he had appeared, he ran amok in the world and started a bloody massacre. For the first time, the four successors of an ancient orthodoxy joined forces to attack. In the end, they were killed by Qi Lingxiao with a raise of his hand. After that, the number one expert of the Bash lineage was suppressed by Qi Lingxiao. He skinned his skin and pulled out his tendons before he left. Following that, several other absolute figures were killed one after another. This caused an endless uproar. It was all done by a single person. Qi Lingxiao was like a god of slaughter. He ran amok in the East Triumph world, killing countless dazzling figures of his generation along the way. The Six Hells world destruction art has finally been cultivated by someone. This art can destroy the heavens and the earth. It is like the great purgatory refining the cosmos. It has the power to kill even gods. I never thought that it would appear in the world again after so many years. When this news spread, the world was shocked. An ancient freak, who had been sealed for 10,000 years, had now walked out of his slumber. He had naturally come for the opportunity to become a king in the great era. Moreover, he was unruly and ferocious. He announced to the world in an extremely ostentatious manner, "Is there no one in the current generation who can match me?" This caused great waves in the world. Old monsters from ancient orthodoxies moved out and wanted to kill Qi Lingxiao in secret. However, they failed time and time again and were killed instead. The reason was that Qi Lingxiao had a holy treasure on him that could shake the heavens. The great era hasn't truly arrived, yet he is already killing. This is too ostentatious. In an ancient city covered in misty rain, a beautiful woman in white walked on the street. She was spotless. Her body flowed with the luster of ice and snow. Her face was beautiful yet cold. She was like a proud and aloof iceberg, making others feel ashamed of their inferiority. Saintess Lin Shui has appeared. That day, news spread out from this city and shook the world. Saintess Lin Shui was a peerless beauty who shocked the world for a period of time 3,000 years ago. Countless geniuses fought to bow down to her. Ever since she started cultivating, every step she took could be called perfect. She was like a goddess and had enough resources to make countless geniuses look up to her. I came for the great era. I don't want to make enemies and I don't fear them. These were the words of Saintess Lin Shui. She was calm and composed, but she revealed a type of absolute confidence. Apart from that, there was also news of other freaks and geniuses. There was no lack of people who were even more stunning than Qi Lingxiao and Saintess Lin Shui. Compared to that, the news of Lin Sun defeating Chu Zhongtian was just one of the many pieces of news. It could no longer monopolize the attention of the world. None of this had anything to do with Lin Sun. If it wasn't for saving Gu Yunting, he wouldn't even bother to fight with Chu Zhongtian. On a lone island in the Star Chess Sea, Lin Sun had prepared roasted meat and fine wine. He was entertaining Ah Lu and Gu Yunting. You don't know what's happening in the outside world? Lin Sun had originally planned to get some information from Ah Lu. He didn't expect this guy to be completely clueless. Why should I care about those ancient freaks, geniuses, saintesses, and geniuses? They have nothing to do with me. Are they worth my attention? If they dare to provoke me, I'll just smash them to death with my rod. Ah Lu said vaguely. He was currently gnawing on black dog meat. His mouth was covered in grease, and he was very happy. It was as if the fine wine and roasted meat in his hands were more important than those geniuses and geniuses. Heartless, Lin Sun muttered in his heart. He had already understood that Ah Lu had indeed come looking for him this time. Moreover, Ah Lu didn't intend to leave. He said that he wanted to follow Lin Sun into the great world and seize opportunities. Lin Sun was quite happy. He thought that this was a form of trust and admiration Ah Lu had for him. Who would have thought that the real reason was that Ah Lu's master, the sloppy old Taoist, had said that demon god Lin was a sinister and ruthless person. As long as Lin Sun was careful not to be tricked by him, he would definitely not suffer in the great world. It was one thing to say that demon god Lin was sinister and ruthless, but he also had to be careful not to be tricked by Lin Sun. Lin Sun had to admit that Ah Lu was really an old bastard. I've heard of something. As the great world draws closer, the peerless figures of those ancient orthodoxies are all making preparations to enter a place called the domain of the Absolute Summit, Gu Yunting suddenly said. He thought that this news should be helpful to Lin Sun. As expected, Lin Sun was immediately attracted and asked about it. I heard that after the great world arrives, there will be a shocking change in the ancient desolation domain, and a mysterious ancient domain will appear. Anyone who enters the ancient desolation domain will be able to seize opportunities to become a peerless king realm expert. So, this domain is called the domain of the Absolute Summit. In the ancient times, this domain of the Absolute Summit had once descended into the world, and it attracted countless geniuses to enter and compete for the Great Way. Speaking of this, Gu Yunting added, by the way, the Tianjiao Golden List will also appear in the domain of the Absolute Summit. Can anyone enter that place? Lin Sun couldn't help but ask. This was very crucial. Gu Yunting said, anyone below the king realm has the opportunity to enter. Lin Sun heaved a sigh of relief. It couldn't be better. If there were no such restrictions, the old monsters of the King Realm and sages would probably be unable to help but enter and have a look. However, when Lin Sun wanted to know the specific situation of the domain of the Absolute Summit, Gu Yunting shook his head. Because he had only heard of it and didn't have a chance to understand it in depth. Even then, Lin Sun was still able to determine that every single genius that desired to attain the Peak King Realm in the Great World would definitely target the domain of the Absolute Summit. This meant that at that time, all the geniuses would definitely compete within it and launch an unprecedented competition for the Great Way. Moreover, it was bound to be extremely tragic. After all, the Peak King Realm wasn't something that just anyone could attain. According to this deduction, Yun Qingbai will definitely enter this place as well at that time. Lin Sun thought in his heart. After he ate and drank to his heart's content, Alu found a place and went to sleep. He seemed as if he didn't care about anything since he had a big brother like Lin Sun, and he didn't seem to regard Lin Sun as an outsider at all. Lin Sun originally intended to make Gu Yunting stay behind, but Gu Yunting intended to leave and search for information about the Great World. Even though he wasn't an absolute figure, he didn't intend to give up on this goal. This aroused a trace of respect in Lin Sun's heart. Gu Yunting had such a persistent heart, so long as he persisted in cultivating, then his accomplishments in the future would definitely grow higher and higher. Gu Yunting left, and Lin Sun and Ah Lu continued to stay on the lone island. From this day on, Lin Sun once again entered into cultivation, either to comprehend the power of the Great Way or to deduce the various Taoism techniques he had mastered. He didn't waste any time. Occasionally, he would also comprehend the mysteries of the Dharma scripture and compare it with his own Taoist path. He had a feeling of drawing parallels and inferring other things from one instance, which benefited Lin Sun a lot. This was a Taoist scripture written by Holy Monk Du Ji and Black Phoenix Holy Empress together. It was compiled after countless years of painstaking efforts. It not only contained the Taoism and Taoism techniques of the Earthly Depository Temple and the Phoenix tribe, but also the comprehension and experience of the two sages on the Great Way. It was extremely precious and valuable, even above the ancient scriptures of some ancient orthodoxies. Lin Sun was neither a Buddhist practitioner nor a descendant of the Phoenix tribe, but he could comprehend and cultivate the various mysteries in this scripture. From this, it could be seen how extraordinary this scripture was. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. On this day, Lin Sun, who was comprehending the mysteries of the impermanence chop, suddenly trembled and opened his eyes. P.S. The 5th update is here. The goldfish had been exploding for many days in a row, so he planned to take a break and reorganize himself. He was really tired, so he would continue exploding after he recovered his energy. Of course, he would maintain the normal updating. If the children felt that the goldfish was awesome, they would throw monthly tickets. If there were no monthly tickets, they would add it to the bookshelf for collection. Chapter 11:24. Lin Sun woke up from his cultivation with a strange look on his face. He turned over his palm and the wordless pagoda emerged. Boom! After that, a rumbling that sounded like muffled thunder resounded while an expanse of golden light seethed and shot into the sky. Alu, who was sleeping soundly, trembled with fear. He suddenly got up and shouted with his huge masonry iron rod in his hand, "Damn it, who is this monster?" At this time, the dazzling golden light converged and gradually outlined a figure with his hands behind his back, standing proudly in the void, looking up at the sky and sighing. In ancient times I was the king. 8 directions and 6 directions alone. Today, before the awakening of the great era, dare to compete with the geniuses. A deep and magnetic voice floated between heaven and earth. The golden light in the vast starry sky converged, revealing the true appearance of the figure. He was dressed in a green robe, with fair skin and a jade-like face. He was extremely handsome and had a pair of golden eyes. At this time, with his hands behind his back, He looked up at the sky with an evil and disdainful smile, which was very eye-catching. Alu was dumbfounded. Which immortal was this? The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched. He hadn't seen him for several years, but this guy was more elegant than before, more and more showy, narcissistic and shameless. This man was Old Toad, Jindi, a descendant of the three-legged golden toad. Old Toad turned his head and reprimanded with a dignified look, "Little Lin, come and kowtow when you see me appear out of nowhere." Alu gasped. Who on earth was this guy? How dare he call his elder brother Little Lin? But Lin Sun said with a fake smile, "Kowtow?" Old Toad said unhappily, "Stupid. Little Lin, you don't think I'm still the same as before, do you? I might as well tell you that I've awakened my gifted bloodline and mastered the unique secret method in the world. This time, I'm bound to step on all the geniuses, sweep the world, and reach the top of the world." Speaking of this, he looked down at Lin Sun and said proudly, "So, you'd better come and kowtow. Maybe I'll give you some opportunities when I become a king for the sake of our past relationship, which will be enough for you to enjoy endlessly." Alu was dumbfounded. Lin Sun smiled. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Old Toad squinted at Lin Sun and said, "I'm not joking with you, but..." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Sun slapped the back of Old Toad's head. The latter staggered and shouted angrily, "Little Lin, how dare you, Pa!" Lin Sun hit him on the back of the head again and said, "Little Lin? You are disrespecting the king." Old Toad yelled in a flustered and exasperated manner. Golden divine splendor rose from its entire body, and when its eyes opened and closed, terrifying flames shot out like a sea of fire. His aura had become extremely terrifying all of a sudden. Blasphemous king? Lin Sun raised his eyebrow. The old toad had indeed become extremely powerful and couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before, but it still couldn't stop Lin's slap. The slap made the old toad slip and almost fall down. F***ck, how did you become so powerful? Old Toad panicked, no longer arrogant and conceited. He covered the back of his head in exasperation and stamped with rage. Seeing Lin Sun raise his hand again, the old toad hurriedly screamed and waved his hand. "Don't hit me, don't hit me! Aren't we brothers who have gone through life and death together?" Lin Sun sneered. "You only remembered now? But..." Another slap on the back of the head. The old toad almost burst into tears. After several years of closed-door training, he had successfully awakened his bloodline talent and his cultivation had undergone a rebirth. He was no longer the same as before. He had thought that after coming out of closed-door training this time, he would be able to look down on the world and sweep away all his peers. Who would have thought that just Lin Sun alone would make him irresistible? "Who is Little Lin?" asked Lin Sun. The old toad's face was cloudy and uncertain, as if it still couldn't accept the cruel reality of being hit by Lin Sun. But when he saw Lin Sun raise his hand, he immediately shouted, "There is only little gold in this world, not Little Lin." Little gold? Lin Sun was stunned and then suddenly realized that old Toad's original name was Jindi. But why was this guy calling himself Little Gold so disgusting? "Then do I still need to kowtow?" asked Lin Sun again. The old toad hurriedly shook its head and said embarrassedly, "Just kidding, just kidding." But his heart was filled with grief and indignation. After several years of silence, he had thought that he could run amok and look down on Lin Sun. Who would have thought that he would be reduced to such a state? How miserable! He wailed in his heart. Lin Sun grunted and continued to ask, "Do I count as disrespecting the king?" The old toad almost collapsed and hurriedly said, "I'll call you Big Brother, okay? Don't bully me like this." "Ha ha, I thought you were powerful, but it turns out that you're just a good-looking but useless idiot. Damn, you almost scared me just now." Next to him, Alu laughed unscrupulously and looked down on the old toad. Seeing a barbarian dare to laugh at it, the old toad was instantly annoyed and said coldly, "Bumpkin, who gave you the courage to laugh at me?" Believe it or not, I'll kill you. Alu grinned. I don't believe it. You. The old toad was thoroughly annoyed. It was fine if it was beaten by Lin Sun, but now even a barbarian dared to provoke it like this. This was intolerable. Boom. He suddenly stepped out and grabbed with his palm. Dazzling golden light rotated and vaguely, an astonishing phenomenon of swallowing the sun and spitting out the moon and moving the stars appeared. At this moment, the old toad's power was extremely terrifying. Lin Sun was surprised. With a wave of his sleeve, the restriction of the star chess spread out to avoid accidentally injuring the old toad. At the same time, Alu also laughed and began to fight with the old toad. Boom! In an instant, the two collided with each other, producing a terrible roar that made the whole world tremble. The old toad was dazzling all over, golden light soaring into the sky. He was performing a kind of world-shocking Taoist magic. Every blow he struck presented a grand momentum that could swallow the sun and moon, fierce, and overbearing. At the beginning, Alu was actually suppressed because of a moment of carelessness. This made him furious. Idiot, do you really think I'm afraid of you? Boom. Alu's figure spread out. His figure was like a majestic mountain, and his blood and chi were boiling like the ocean. He was like a barbarian god, and when he waved his fist, even the void seemed to be unable to bear his tyrannical physical strength, producing a sharp and ear-piercing explosion and collapsing in disorder. Yo, I didn't realize that a bumpkin like you is actually a great character on the path of becoming a sage. If I'm not wrong, you're cultivating the Supreme Emperor suppression technique, right? The old toad was a little surprised and seemed to find it hard to believe. What's your relationship with the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant martial emperor? Cut the crap. Are all the descendants of the golden toad bloodline women? Why are you so long-winded? Alu roared. His figure was imposing and ferocious as he charged into the void. One could faintly see the pores all over his body open up, and phantoms of divine elephants appeared. With his body as a prison, he stepped into the starry sky and suppressed the world. That kind of divine might caused the world to change color. Women? I'll beat you to death, you bumpkin! The old toad shrieked as if its reverse scale had been touched, and it rushed forward to fight Alu madly. The two fought under the starry sky. Divine brilliance surged and the wind and clouds surged. It was actually an unprecedented and shocking battle. Lin Sun didn't stop it. He raised his head to watch the battle, but his heart was a little uneasy. He could already see that after several years of closed-door cultivation, the old toad was like a different person from before. It stood on the peerless path of the reincarnation development realm. This was very shocking. It should be known that in the ultimate, the old toad's combat strength was extremely weak. It had even said that it would be very difficult for it to display its combat strength because it hadn't awakened its bloodline talent. But now it was completely different. The change was too great. It had actually set foot on the peak in one go. This kind of transformation could absolutely be called shocking. Moreover, the Taoism he mastered was also extremely terrifying. It could swallow the sun and spit out the moon, move the stars, and draw upon the momentum of the universe. It was really mysterious and boundlessly terrifying. This could be seen from the fact that he could fight fiercely with Alu without falling into a disadvantageous position. It should be known that Alu was one of the top 10 junior giants. Moreover, he was only 19 years old this year, came from a secret realm, and walked on the path of becoming a sage. But even so, the old toad could fight with him, which really surprised Lin Sun. Similarly, the combat strength Alu showed made Lin Sun unable to calm down. He clearly remembered that Alu was far less powerful than he was now in the junior giants competition. It seemed that in less than 2 months, some kind of shocking change had also happened to Alu. Supreme Emperor World Suppression Technique, the bloodline of the ancient divine elephant martial emperor. Is what the old toad said true? Only then did Lin soon realize that he hadn't had a detailed understanding of Alu before. This barbarian-like guy should actually have an extremely shocking origin. Boom. Suddenly, Alu in the sky waved the giant wrought iron cudgel like a barbarian god wielding a heaven-shattering artifact, revealing a terrifying and boundless destructive power. Divine Elephant 9 Smelted Cudgel. You bumpkin, you really have something to do with the bloodline of the Divine Elephant Martial Emperor. The old toad seemed to be astonished. Without delay, a dazzling, dreamy golden light suddenly burst out from between his eyebrows. When he looked carefully, he noticed to his surprise that it was a treasure that seemed like a copper coin. It was round on the outside and square on the inside, and there were golden wings on its sides. Moreover, there were obscure and strange markings of the Tao on it, causing it to be dazzling like a small sun. Clang! With just one blow, Alu's giant wrought iron cudgel buzzed violently and was about to fly out of his hand uncontrollably. The copper coin of Treasurefall? Is there really such a thing in the world? Alu cried out loudly and exerted all his strength. Only then did he manage to hold the giant rod in his hand tightly and prevent it from breaking free. Boom! The two of them fought fiercely again. The void was blown up, the universe was in disorder, and the sea was tumbling violently. If Lin Sun hadn't controlled the restrictive power of the sea in advance, the fluctuations of the battle alone would definitely have caused the suppression of the all-side stars formation. However, he was in no mood to pay attention to this at the moment. He was completely attracted by the battle between the old toad and Alu and couldn't calm down. Whether it was Alu or the old toad, as the battle became more and more fierce, the fighting skills they displayed became more and more amazing, which Lin Sun had never seen before. How could he remain calm? Chapter 11:25. Plop, plop. In the end, Old Toad and Alu were separated by Lin Sun and thrown to the ground from the void. If they continued to fight, they would fight for real, which wasn't what Lin Sun wanted to see. Old Toad's handsome face was swollen and bruised. He lay on the ground, gasping for breath. Alu was also twitching all over, every inch of his skin trembling as he panted like a bull. It's worthy of being called Supreme Emperor Suppression. It's as powerful as an elephant suppressing the starry sky, and as mighty as an emperor suppressing the world. I'm very happy to see its power today. Old Toad's face was gloomy as he sighed. However, his head was red and swollen like a pig's, which was rather comical. Alas, you're flattering me. Golden Toads swallowing stars and spitting menstruation has the power to swallow a bull and seize the power of nature. It's praised as a peerless martial art of the ancient times. We can only sigh at our inferiority. Alu also sighed with emotion, but his whole body twitched as if in pain. No discord, no concord. Yes, it was a good fight. It's fate that we meet. Why don't we become sworn brothers? Wonderful. Just what I want. The more Old Toad and Alu talked, the happier they became. They seemed to appreciate each other and wish they hadn't met earlier. They were just short of throwing their arms around each other and drinking to each other. Enough. Lin soon resisted the disgust in his heart and pulled the two who were flattering each other apart. Big brother, I think this green-robed little brother can be the third brother. Alu looked at Lin Sun sincerely. Old Toad was stunned for a moment, then laughed. I'm afraid that's inappropriate. I've been brothers with Lin Sun for a long time. You came later, so we can't mix up our seniority. I'd better be the second brother. Alu shook his head. That won't do. Old Toad frowned. Why not? It's only right and proper. Alu said angrily. You want to be the second brother with me, don't you? Old Toad's face darkened. You're still young. It's not easy to be the second brother. I'm doing this for your own good. Alu suddenly rose and said fiercely, I'm definitely the second brother. Previously, the two of them regretted not meeting each other earlier, but now they were at daggers drawn, which gave Lin a headache. The scariest thing was that these two guys were actually fighting to be second brother. With a strange look on his face, Lin Sun couldn't help but say, "Everyone has the second brother. Why should we fight for it?" Old Toad and Ah Lu were stunned, then their expressions changed as if they had eaten a dead fly. "Fine, you can be number 2. Old Toad had a magnanimous look on its face. "I can't do it. Why don't you do it?" Ah Lu also began to shirk responsibility. The two of them also felt a wave of disgust in their hearts. Just now, they were only concerned with suppressing the other party, but they never thought that the word number 2 was not a good word. Didn't every good man have his own second brother? Who the hell would want to be a plaything like that? The more they thought about it, the more disgusted they felt. They regretted it so much that their intestines turned green. If they had known this would happen, they would have happily agreed to it. But Lin Sun was amused and laughed wildly. Lin Sun was very happy that Old Toad had woken up. Next, Lin Sun learned that Old Toad had successfully awakened the talent of the three-legged golden toad over the years of closed-door cultivation and obtained the inherited power branded in its blood. One was the sun-swallowing menstruation. One was the copper coin of treasures. The cultivation method was the supreme inheritance of the golden toad bloodline, and the treasure was Old Toad's life divine weapon. So it's not the copper coin of treasures. Ah Lu seemed a little disappointed. Old Toad rolled its eyes. "What do you know? When my copper coin of treasures is cultivated to the extreme, it can transform into the real copper coin of treasures." Ah Lu smiled. "I'm afraid you can't do it." "Is the copper coin of treasures very powerful?" asked Lin Sun. Old Toad immediately raised the corner of its mouth and said, "It's said to be able to knock down all the treasures in the world. How can it not be powerful? But this treasure is only a legend, and no one has ever seen it since ancient times." After a pause, he said proudly, "But my copper coin of treasures is not simple. It contains a wisp of congenital clear chi and a wisp of primordial mystery. As long as it's used, although it can't knock down a holy treasure, it's more than enough to knock down some supreme weapons." This time, Ah Lu didn't refute. He had just fought with Old Toad and knew the power of the copper coin of treasures. Then, Ah Lu also confessed that he did cultivate the Supreme Emperor's suppression art, but he didn't know whether it had anything to do with the bloodline of the ancient divine Elephant Martial Emperor. During the primeval times, the divine Elephant Martial Emperor was once one of the strongest experts in the world, and he possessed extraordinary and supreme might. Many people guessed that he'd already broken through the limits of the Saint Tao, and he'd completely transcended the world and attained great freedom. Old Toad told a secret, but later, the divine Elephant Martial Emperor mysteriously disappeared and never appeared in the world again. This closed-door cultivation awakened the talent of his bloodline, but also awakened many silent and sealed memories. Speaking of this, Old Toad couldn't help squinting at Ah Lu. Ah Lu said frankly, "Don't ask me. I don't know." "Then what do you know?" Old Toad was a little dissatisfied. "I only know that the bloodline of the three-legged golden toad was cut off in ancient times. I didn't expect that there are still descendants surviving in the world and awakening the inheritance imprinted in the bloodline." Ah Lu's eyes were bright as he stared at Old Toad. "As far as I know, not everyone can awaken the bloodline inheritance, even in the three-legged golden toad." Old Toad said expressionlessly, "You know nothing about the affairs of my clan." Ah Lu retorted sarcastically, "You know nothing about whether I have anything to do with the divine Elephant Martial Emperor or not." Lin Sun hurriedly changed the subject. These two guys were completely at loggerheads, and it was easy to start a war. "Lin Sun, the great era is coming. This is an unprecedented great era, and it is destined to be the last time this era will be extremely brilliant. After that, it will wither." Old Toad suddenly got up, looked at the sky, and said in an impassioned voice, "This is the best time for us to advance triumphantly. If we miss this opportunity, we won't have it again." Then, he looked at Lin Sun. Do you have any plans? Lin Sun was stunned. Does stepping into the absolute king realm count? Old Toad slapped his thigh. You deserve to be one of us. In the great era, this is the realm we seek. When the absolute domain comes, it will be the time for us to rise and become kings. You also know about the absolute domain? Lin Sun was surprised. Nonsense, it has appeared more than once in ancient times. How can I not know? Old Toad was very contemptuous. This guy was like this, unconsciously showing off and being very arrogant. Lin Sun slapped the back of his head and immediately suppressed his arrogance. Only then did Old Toad obediently tell Lin Sun about the absolute domain. Anyone under the absolute king realm can enter the absolute domain. In ancient times, every time the absolute domain came, it would inevitably attract the attention of all the practitioners in the world. No matter who it was, as long as their cultivation didn't exceed the absolute king realm, they would fight desperately to enter. Do you know why? It's very simple. The good fortune and lucky chances in the region of absolute apex were too much. It's enough to make any orthodoxy and any ancient clan jealous. Old Toad's saliva flew everywhere, as if he was pointing out the world. We want to seize the opportunities of the absolute king realm, while other practitioners want to seize other opportunities and opportunities. In short, this is taking what we need. Lin Sun couldn't help asking, what opportunities and opportunities are there on Earth? Taoism, inheritance, ancient treasures, divine materials, immortal treasures, as well as innate Taoist symbols, spiritual embryos, and so on. It's enough to make sages crazy. Old Toad's eyes were golden and bright, fiery. Some people have even found the true dragon nest and immortal phoenix cave. All kinds of heaven-defying opportunities are absolutely beyond your imagination. Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. Really? It can't be fake. The Old Toad said. At the very least, I know that in the primordial times, there was a cowherd boy who was merely at the true martial realm who accidentally swallowed a divine fruit in the apex domain, and in a short 100 days, he became a king in one go. Lin Sun was stunned. This sounded too incredible. Was there such a magical place in the world? Do you know why I woke up in this life? Old Toad said mysteriously. Without waiting for Lin Sun to ask, he answered himself. Because, in ancient times, although the absolute domain appeared several times, some of the nature-defying fortunes were sealed. According to the deductions of the ancient almighties, only when an extremely dazzling great era arrives will these sealed heaven-defying fortunes be discovered and obtained by others. Speaking of this, Old Toad couldn't help sighing. If these heaven-defying opportunities were not sealed and could not be broken, there would have been many absolute king realm cultivators in ancient times. Lin Sun suddenly came to his senses and said, So, you woke up in this life to wait for the arrival of the great world and enter the absolute domain? Old Toad nodded. In the past, I was muddled and couldn't remember anything because the bloodline power in my body was sealed, so my memories were incomplete. But it's different now. I understand my past and know what I should do. Lin Sun knew that Old Toad was indeed very weak at that time. He didn't even know how he woke up and how he came to this world. Then, Lin Sun thought of another thing. Recently, no one knew how many ancient freaks appeared in the ancient desolation domain, which caused a sensation in the world. Some were peerless geniuses who had been silent for thousands of years. Some were freaks and evildoers who had been silent for more than 10,000 years. There were even some who had been silent for a longer time, such as the little child on the sacred island of 5 elements and Xiaohao, the young master of the Nether Star Imperial clan who was silent in the Egg of Constellation. They should have been asleep since ancient times. At this time, Lin Sun suddenly found that Old Toad beside him was also an ancient freak. Otherwise, how could it not awaken its bloodline power and understand its past until now? All of a sudden, Lin Sun looked at Old Toad in a different way. This guy looked like a handsome young man in a green robe. Who could imagine that he was an old monster born in ancient times? What are you looking at? Old Toad felt uncomfortable being stared at. Chapter 11:26. Shivering, Old Toad was frightened by Lin's stare and hurriedly said, "There's nothing special about ancient freaks. Compared with contemporary peerless figures, they've been dormant for a longer time, accumulated a more terrifying foundation, and mastered the power of the great Tao. That's all." Lin stared at Old Toad with a faint look in his eyes and said, "You can't live forever without becoming a king. Since ancient times, you've been dormant for countless years, but you can still keep your bone age young. Isn't that special?" Old Toad shivered all over. "I warn you, don't even think about doing anything to me. I swear I'll die before you do." Alu was the first to speak. He spat, "You're not a fairy or a saintess. I'd be blind to have designs on you. But then again, you're indeed quite handsome. You're even prettier than some of the gorgeously dressed women in this world." At the end of his words, he couldn't help laughing. Old Toad was so angry that he almost fought with the barbarian. What he hated most was comparing his appearance with a woman's. Then, he sighed and said, "The lifespan of all living beings is enslaved by the law of time, and no one can change it. Unless you can break the barrier of time, you can live forever, but this is almost impossible. Even sages can't get rid of the shackles of time. Although ancient freaks can keep their young potential, it's not because they're powerful enough to avoid the erosion of time, but because they're all frozen seeds." "Seeds?" asked Lin Sun. "Right, by utilizing a supreme forbidden technique, one's own potential, vitality, and strength would be completely sealed, and one would be able to avoid the corrosion of time. It's like a seed that's been buried in the snow, and so long as the seal is removed and the seed is planted, it would be able to grow swiftly and bear fruit." Old Toad was worried that Lin Sun would dissect and study it, so he told him everything he knew about ancient freaks. However, not everyone can become a seed. At the end of his words, Old Toad looked grim. The ups and downs of the world and the changes of time are the order of the world. Strong as the ancient orthodoxy is, it's just a drop in the ocean in front of time. To avoid the erosion of time and hide the seeds so that they have a chance to awaken again, not only will it cost immeasurable resources and power, but it will also take a gamble. If you're lucky, the seeds may bloom again. Bad luck. Being frozen means death. Under such circumstances, only great sects and sects with boundlessly terrifying reserves would have the ability to make arrangements in advance and plant seeds. Hearing this, Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart and said, "Does this mean that every ancient freak who can awaken in this world has won the gamble of fate? As for the other ancient freaks that have never been born, it is extremely likely that they will never be able to come back to life again?" Old Toad nodded. "Indeed." Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "If so, is every ancient freak who comes back to life in this world the most powerful figure in an ancient sect?" Old Toad nodded again. "Sealing a seed consumes an enormous amount of resources and power. As far as I know, some primordial forces exhausted the power of their entire race, poured in all their efforts, and gambled on the destiny of their entire race just to awaken a certain heavenly son in the future. Under such circumstances, how can a sealed seed be a mediocre person? It's even to the extent that it can be said that every single seed that's sealed away possesses the resources to step foot into the peak of the king realm. No matter if it's resources, natural talent, or physique, they aren't inferior to any peerless genius in the world. All they lack is an opportunity to become a king." Lin Sun completely understood. No wonder they were regarded as freaks. They were the strongest ones selected by a group of ancient sects with all their strength to become a king. If there was a great opportunity to become a supreme king in ancient times, it could be foreseen that these ancient freaks would never choose to stay silent and wait. They would have become kings long ago. Countless years of silence and waiting, all for the sake of this great era. Lin Sun was a little shocked. For the first time, he found that the road to Tao was so cruel. If they were born at the wrong time, even if they had the talent and peerless demeanor, they could only be in vain. Fortunately, for the top figures in the world, they were at least lucky, because the era they lived in had ushered in this great opportunity. Moreover, Lin Sun also roughly judged that there were differences among the so-called ancient freaks. Some had been silent for a long time. They had been frozen since ancient times and began to be silent. Some had been silent for a short time, like Chu Zhongtian, who had become famous 1,000 years ago. This also meant that, from ancient times until now, there had been freaks that had been hidden at different times. But the number could never be too large. As Old Toad said, if one wanted to hide a seed, the price to pay was too high, and they needed to gamble. Even if they were hidden, it was very likely that they would never wake up again. How powerful are the ancient freaks? This was what Lin Sun was most concerned about. Old Toad suddenly became arrogant. Looking disdainfully at the sky, he said proudly, "In terms of foundation, they are probably about the same as me. But in terms of combat power, there are only a few who are stronger than me." "How many is a few?" Lin Sun asked. Old Toad coughed dryly. "How can I know? Anyway, there can't be many. After all, it's really hard to meet a few peerless figures like me." Alu immediately said disdainfully, "This Toad is yawning. What a big tone. Get lost." Old Toad was so angry that his teeth itched. This barbarian always liked to go against him, which was simply too annoying. The two of them started to quarrel again. Lin Sun was in no mood to pay attention to them. If that mysterious woman's deduction was correct, there was only a month left before the arrival of the Great Era. When the time came, the absolute summit domain was bound to appear. Whether it was the top figures of the orthodoxies of the present age, the peerless evildoers of the sacred hermit lands, or the ancient freaks who had been frozen until now, they were bound to enter the absolute summit domain in order to achieve the absolute summit domain. In this way, a struggle for supremacy among the world's tens of thousands of prides was bound to be inevitable, and the competition was bound to be crueler and more terrifying than expected. "It's time to take a walk in the outside world," Lin Sun muttered to himself. He wanted to learn more about the Great Era, as well as the shocking changes that were currently happening in the world. "HM?" Suddenly, Lin Sun's heart skipped a beat, and joy emerged in his eyes. With a flip of his hand, the wordless pagoda appeared. With a strange roar, a delicate and slender figure walked out. The darkness was like the luster of the eternal night, and it filled the surroundings of her graceful figure, making her look like a god that had walked out of the eternal night. Xia Ji. All the distractions in Lin Sun's mind disappeared, and his mind and eyes were focused on her. As before, when Xia Ji woke up this time, she was still wearing the black cloak. The brim of the hat covered half of her face, only revealing two slightly pale cherry lips and a white and delicate chin. However, unlike before, Xia Ji became taller again. Her figure was graceful and slender. Standing there, the top of her head had reached the height of Lin Sun's ear. In the mortal world, Xia Ji was still a young and beautiful little girl. But when she woke up at the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival, she was already slim and graceful like a budding girl. Although she hadn't reached the marriageable age, she had already shown her stunning beauty. But Xia Ji, who appeared at this time, was different. She was as graceful as a willow with a slender waist. Although her face was covered by the brim of the hat, the curves of her body had already revealed a kind of breathtaking beauty. Gulp gulp. Next to her, Old Toad and Alu both swallowed hard, their eyes fixed on her. It turned out to be Xia Ji's black cloak. It was originally too small for her, but now as she grew taller, it seemed to be very tight on her body. In particular, the hem could only cover up to her thighs, revealing a pair of straight, white, and slender legs. Her skin was as smooth as mutton fat and ivory, perfect and flawless, exuding a clear and lustrous luster. Even Lin Sun felt his heart beat violently. This picture was too impactful. However, when he saw Old Toad and Alu's infatuated look, Lin Sun's face suddenly darkened. He lifted his foot and kicked them away. Then, he took out one of his clothes and quickly tied it around Xia Zhi's waist. In the process, Lin Sun's movements were casual, just like when he covered the sleeping Xia Zhi with a quilt in Feiyun village. It seemed that she didn't realize that the little girl was no longer the little girl of that year, and the current scene was no longer the same as before. However, from beginning to end, Xia Zhi was also very calm. Her clear eyes quietly watched Lin Sun through the brim of the hat, and she was as natural as before, without any resistance or objection. Soon, the clothes that were tied around her waist barely covered the pair of legs that were exuding a fatal temptation. Lin Sun was satisfied. He got up and said, "Let's make do with it for now. I'll buy you some suitable clothes when I have time." In fact, it was a little inappropriate for the clothes to be tied around her waist, but when they fell on Xia Zhi's graceful and beautiful body, they added a touch of another kind of amorous feeling. Xia Zhi nodded. Lin Sun patted his forehead and said, "By the way, I didn't forget what you said. I left a lot of delicious food for you." As he spoke, he began to take things out. There was barbecued meat, all kinds of snacks, as well as first-rate food with exotic flowers and fruit. There was a great variety of them. While busy, Lin Sun said, "Is it also because the great world is coming that you woke up this time?" Xia Zhi answered and naturally squatted on the ground with her hands around her legs, staring at Lin Sun. "I knew it. Nowadays there are many ancient freaks in the world. It's very lively. Even Old Toad has woken up. It would be strange if you didn't wake up. By the way, do you want to go to the absolute summit domain with me this time? It is said that there are a lot of heaven-defying fortunes sealed there. If you like one, I'll help you get it." The isolated island was silent, surrounded by a vast silver ocean. Lin Sun talked incessantly as he was busy, which made him seem a little long-winded. But it could also be seen that he was in a good mood at the moment. Chapter 11:27. However, when Lin Sun finished his work and took out all kinds of food, Xia Zhi didn't enjoy them immediately. She still stared at Lin Sun, as if he was the only one in her eyes and heart. The world and the food in front of her didn't seem to exist. Lin Sun was stunned. "What's wrong?" He stopped what he was doing and looked at Xia Zhi, but there was a vague feeling in his heart, as if something beyond his expectation was going to happen. Xia Zhi shook her head without saying anything. She lowered her eyes, picked up a piece of barbecue and enjoyed it. Lin Sun found that Xia Zhi was eating faster. She seemed to be calm, but she was absent-minded and just ate for the sake of eating. Lin Sun looked at her in silence, wondering if something had happened when Nirvana recultivated last time, so that Xia Zhi seemed to be a little strange. Xia Zhi had finished eating everything at this time. Then she raised her beautiful face and stared at Lin Sun with a pair of eyes as clear as the stars in the sky, saying, "I'm going to leave for a while." Her voice was ethereal, clear and soft. It fell into Lin Sun's ears like a thunder. His heart suddenly trembled and his face changed slightly. "Leave?" Xia Zhi nodded, her eyebrows like the new moon in the sky, and said, "The fifth recultivation of Nirvana is different from the past. I need to be reborn in the battle and transform in the dark." Lin Sun took a deep breath and asked, "Where are you going?" Xia Zhi got up and raised her head to look at the sky. It was unknown when a layer of darkness like the eternal night came from the sky. It was as thick as ink, covering the sky and emitting a depressing atmosphere. Old Toad and Alu in the distance were also alarmed and looked over. The eternal night was like an iron curtain that blocked the sky, as if the dark doomsday was coming, with a kind of suffocating power of silence. "Go there." Xia Zhi's voice was low. Her beautiful face, which could make the world dim, was as quiet as before, but with a kind of determination. Lin Sun stared at the night sky with a solemn look. "What is that place? Can I go with you?" Xia Zhi shook her head. "That's my battlefield alone. No one can go there except me." The heavens and the earth fell into an extremely oppressive silence. A mysterious door gradually appeared in the night sky, but it was hidden in the darkness and could not be seen clearly. There's not much time left. A spear silently appeared in Xia Zhi's hand. It was completely pure white and suffused with strands of dreamlike clear radiance. At the same time, an incomparable murderous aura spread out from Xia Zhi's body, causing her clothes to flutter. Her graceful figure was ethereal, as if she wanted to ride the wind and kill her way to the ninth heaven. Lin Sun's expression was uncertain. His original joy had all disappeared. His heart was empty, and his chest felt like it was blocked by a rock. This was the first time that Summer Solstice said she wanted to leave since she came to Feiyun village in the mortal world. In the past, although Xia Zhi had been taken away by the Queen of the Dark Night, Lin Sun knew that with the Queen's care, Xia Zhi would not be in danger. But this time, it was obviously different. Summer Solstice was going to fight alone. For a moment, Lin Sun was confused. He wanted to stop Xia Zhi, but he couldn't bear it. Xia Zhi had said that her fifth recultivation needed to be in the battle. This was her way of cultivation. How could Lin Sun stop her? Suddenly, Lin Sun only felt that his body was hugged, and a warm and delicate body poured into his arms. He looked down and found it was Xia Zhi. He was stiff all over, and Xia Zhi's voice rang in his ears. "Wait for me to come back." Her voice was clear and irresistible. Lin Sun nodded subconsciously. Xia Zhi took a few steps back and took a deep look at Lin Sun. Then she turned around and stepped into the void. Her clothes fluttered, and she held the spear in her hand. As soon as she stepped out, a path condensed by darkness emerged in the void and went straight to the sky. She didn't look back. It was not a farewell of life and death. She didn't hesitate anymore. It was not like she would never come back. Xia Zhi left with firm steps and ascended into the void. Her delicate figure was getting farther and farther away, more and more hazy, and soon it was shrouded by the eternal darkness. Lin Sun stood on the island and stared at the beautiful figure gradually disappearing. His heart seemed to be hollowed out, and he had an unprecedented impulse to go with her. Boom! The chi around him roared, and the power of the heavenly cycle stars formation in this world was activated. The bright starlight rose up and turned into a rain of light, rushing into the sky. However, the sky was too high, and the darkness was like the eternal night, far from being shaken. At this time, Xia Zhi had come to the dark door in the depths of the sky. She stopped in front of it. "You must take care of yourself. I will always wait for you." A long roar resounded through the sky. A knowing smile appeared on Xia Zhi's lips, and her beautiful and ethereal face showed unprecedented brilliance. At that moment, even the eternal night seemed to be overshadowed. Then, she stepped into the door and disappeared. The eternal night and darkness that covered the sky like an iron curtain also disappeared with her. The sky became clear again, and the stars were shining brightly. On the island, Lin Sun was stunned, and his clothes were fluttering in the wind. Sigh, the word love is really harmful. Old Toad's harsh sigh sounded. Have you been harmed too? Alu was surprised. Are there people in this world who like toads? That's really freaking weird. I'm going to kill you this time, you bumpkin. Exasperated, Old Toad rushed up and started arguing with Alu. However, no matter how much they quarreled, Lin Sun seemed to turn a deaf ear to them. He stood there in a daze, as if his soul had left his body. This made Old Toad and Alu very worried. Could this guy be troubled by love and take things too hard? Lin Sun, what's there to take things too hard? There's no shortage of beautiful saintesses and fairies in this world. I'll catch a few more to warm your bed later to fill your loneliness. Old Toad shouted. Yes, just tell me which woman you like. No matter who she is, I promise I'll send her to your bed. Alu also comforted him, but in a very tough way. Lin Sun turned his head and glanced at them, saying, You're talking nonsense. What do you know? Old Toad shrieked. Damn it, we're being kind, but he doesn't appreciate it. Alu said suspiciously. Do you think he's been hurt by love and his temperament has changed so much that he's no longer interested in all the women in the world? Old Toad was stunned. If that's the case, then it's going to be troublesome. The Great War of the World is about to begin. How can he be thwarted by love now? So, you're the only one who can help him now, Alu said seriously. Me? Old Toad pointed at his own nose in astonishment. Alu patted him on the shoulder and said solemnly, Yes, you're so beautiful. You can give it a try and see if this guy has fallen in love with men. That way, you'll be able to test whether his temperament has changed greatly. Of course, if he really likes men, your looks are more than enough to match him. I'll king kill you. Old Toad flew into a rage. His face turned green and his neck turned red with anger. He let out a deafening roar and fought Alu with all his might, wanting to kill Alu. Even Lin Sun felt a chill run down his spine. If Old Toad hadn't rushed up in advance, he wouldn't have been able to stop himself from beating up this unrestrained barbarian. However, Lin Sun's mood was greatly relieved after this disturbance. In the end, Lin Sun decided not to stay any longer. He left the Star Chess Sea and returned to the outside world. Xia Ji had her own path to pursue, and he also had to prepare for the coming of the Great World. Great World, I Jin am here. My name is destined to shake the heavens. Old Toad shouted excitedly by the shore of the Star Chess Sea. He had been in closed-door training for many years. Now that he had come out, he couldn't wait to sweep across the universe and shock the world. A toad beating the drum and blowing his own trumpet. Alu was very contemptuous. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was keenly aware that the atmosphere between heaven and earth had changed. The shore of the Star Chess Sea was the field of mysterious frost. Originally, this place was extremely desolate and cold. Apart from demonic beasts, there were no other living creatures. But now it had become completely different. Many plants were growing in the layer of ice and rocks, and there were fresh flowers blooming in the cold wind, swaying beautifully. Even the air was no longer piercingly cold like a knife. Instead, there was a rich and warm feeling, and spiritual chi was dense and rising. Ka-cha. The ice beneath Lin Sun's feet cracked inch by inch. Under Lin Sun's gaze, a plant grew little by little. In a few breaths, a verdant green leaf and a crystal-clear blue flower sprouted. Lin Sun plucked the flower and sensed it briefly. A vigorous life force surged toward him. This was just an ordinary flower. If spiritual medicines and herbs were nurtured by this life force, they would definitely undergo shocking changes. The Great World is really coming, Lin Sun murmured. Heaven and earth, everything in this world, were undergoing shocking changes. They were different from before. Furthermore, these changes were still continuing. Hey, someone actually inscribed words here. Not far away, the old toad stood in front of an ice rock and exclaimed in surprise. Lin Sun walked forward and saw lines of words engraved on the surface of the ice rock. They were left by Xiaoqinghe. It turned out that he had come to the Star Chess Sea more than 10 days ago, but Lin Sun was cultivating in seclusion. He couldn't meet Lin Sun, so he could only leave a letter here. He came to invite Lin Sun to participate in a gathering of the top figures of the young generation that was about to be held at the Thousand Streams Spiritual Mountain. The gathering was initiated by Mi Hengzhen of the Sun Moon Shrine. He was a veteran figure whose name had shaken the world for many years. His status in the Sun Moon Shrine was extremely high. The purpose of the gathering was very simple. It was to give the top figures of the young generation a chance to communicate with each other in the context of the coming of the Great World. Moreover, Xiaoqinghe told Lin Sun in a strong tone that if there was nothing urgent, he must attend the gathering. Seeing this, Lin Sun immediately understood that the purpose of this gathering should not be as simple as an exchange. It's not too late. It's said that the gathering will start in a month. It's only been more than 10 days. Should we go and have a look? The old toad rubbed his palms together, looking forward to it. What he liked most was to join in the fun, especially when all the participants were the top figures of the current generation. This made him very excited. This toad can't wait to be in the limelight. Alu cast a sidelong glance at the old toad and exposed his thoughts. Of course, if we really go to the gathering, I'll keep an eye on this toad and won't let him cause trouble. Lin Sun almost couldn't help but roll his eyes. It was already a miracle that this guy was born with a big mouth and didn't cause trouble himself. How could he be worried that others would cause trouble? Let's go, Lin Sun said grumpily. As he spoke, his figure flashed, and he had already swept into the boundless wind and snow. Behind him, the star-chest sea was as tranquil and vast as before. Chapter 11:28. Lin Sun, Old Toad and Alu left the mysterious frost icefield together and went to the outside world. Along the way, he had seen too many shocking changes that he had never seen in the past. First of all, the boundary river between the four worlds was sinking and disappearing at an extremely fast speed. According to the inference, the four worlds would be reunited into a vast continent in less than a month, restoring the ancient style. At the same time, everything in the world was changing. Some ordinary mountains and rivers suddenly changed dramatically. The mountains rose a lot and rich spiritual chi emerged, turning them into blessed places. Some monsters were also transforming at a faster speed. The cultivation barriers that couldn't be broken in the past could now be broken naturally. Even some spiritual medicines and rare treasures that had long been annihilated in the long river of time began to reappear, causing countless orthodoxies and practitioners to compete for them. At the same time, regardless of the aptitude of the practitioners, the speed of advancement was also accelerating, and it was easier for them to comprehend and control the power of the Great Way. These countless, shocking changes were taking place in every area of the four world. It was like the soil that had been silent for a long time was glowing with earth-shaking vitality and was moving towards the ultimate brilliance. And these changes all happened in the past 2 months. It was too shocking. All the practitioners in the world knew that this unprecedented great era was bound to come, but they didn't expect that the omen before the great era was so shocking. Some ancient orthodoxies concluded that this shocking change was the only one since ancient times. In the past years, similar changes had taken place in the world, but none as amazing as this one. But at the same time, the world became turbulent and was no longer as peaceful as before. Ancient freaks frequently appeared in the world, dominating the world and suppressing the top talents of the present age. Most of the news Lin Sun heard was related to ancient freak. A few ancient freaks appeared in this world. During this period of time, it was unknown how many world-shaking great eras they accomplished, and who knew how many people they defeated, causing the world to be in turmoil. These monsters, who have been silent for a long time, are so powerful that it makes people speechless. Even the top figures of the present age are inferior to them. There's no way to compare either. Every single ancient freak is a peerless genius. They have been silent for a long time, waiting for the arrival of this great era. There is no need to doubt their strength. Along the way, similar sighs and discussions could be heard all the time. Lin Sun, Old Toad and Alu were all very surprised. It had only been 2 months, but there had already been so many disturbances in the outside world. They're already this crazy now, but when the absolute peak domain descends, they'll definitely become the target of public criticism. The old toad was quite disdainful, commenting on the disturbances those ancient freaks stirred up. Indeed, Lin Sun had a deep understanding of this. The taller the tree in the forest, the stronger it was, the greater the possibility of being targeted. Big bro, didn't you hear? There are some ancient freaks who want to challenge you, and all of them are saying that if you dare show yourself, they'll definitely crush you, Alu said with a grin. Lin Sun naturally heard some similar rumors along the way. The reason was that 2 months ago, Lin Sun was definitely the most outstanding figure of the young generation in the world. Under such circumstances, it was reasonable for him to be targeted. After all, defeating him was equal to defeating the number 1 on the list of junior giants, which was equal to defeating the influential figure among the contemporary top figures. It was enough to attract the attention of the world and make a name for himself. This was the burden of fame. What's more, some ancient freaks are clamoring that if they catch you, demon god Lin, they'll take you as a slave and serve you by their side to show off their strength. The old toad also shouted, "Let me ask you, can you bear this kind of provocation?" What the old toad said wasn't a lie. Lin Sun had also heard similar rumors. Although he didn't bother to pay attention to these provocations and clamors, if he met these guys, Lin Sun absolutely wouldn't mind giving them an unforgettable lesson. Now, some random Tom, Dick, and Harry dared to step on him to climb to the top? What the hell? However, he also learned that some of the top figures on the list of junior giants were a little embarrassed, because they had all been defeated by some ancient freaks. Even some top figures chose to protect themselves and didn't want to have conflicts with those ancient freaks at this time, so as not to damage their reputation. Let's go. We know too little information after all. Maybe we can learn more by going to Thousand Streams Mountain, said Lin Sun. With the coming of the Great Era, the world was full of ups and downs, and geniuses appeared one after another. Naturally, there would be various grand gatherings of communication and learning. The gathering that was about to take place on the Thousand Flowing Spirit Mountain was initiated by the successor of the Sun Moon Hall, Mi Hungjin. It was said that those attending were all outstanding figures of the current generation, and were people who intended to participate in the competition for the Apex region. Thousand Streams Mountain was located in Purple Moon Province. With the help of the ancient transmission formation, Lin Sun and others arrived in Purple Moon Province a few days in advance. Then they explored all the way and entered Thousand Streams City. As soon as they entered the city, they heard a lot of discussions on the way. This Thousand Streams Grand Gathering has a profound influence. Those who are qualified to participate are all top figures, including many top figures. I heard that Mi Hungjin wants to invite some peers to discuss important matters at this grand gathering. It's a pity that we are not qualified to climb the mountain and participate. Lin Sun and others didn't need to explore. They learned some news about the Thousand Streams Grand Gathering from all kinds of discussions and headed to the center of the city. A lonely mountain stood in the center of the city. It was beautiful, and it was thousands of meters high. There were thousands of waterfalls falling from the sky, showing the spectacle of thousands of streams running together and the Milky Way rolling back. This was Thousand Streams Mountain, with an extraordinary origin. Near the mountain was an extremely lively area. There were tea houses, restaurants, and shops that sold spiritual medicines and spiritual treasures. When Lin Sun and others arrived, many cultivators had gathered nearby, and they were all talking about the gathering in Thousand Streams Mountain. Let's go. Without delay, Lin Sun took Old Toad and Ah Lu up the mountain. This made many cultivators show envy and awe. Thousand Streams Mountain was not so easy to climb. It was covered with inexplicable power of the Great Way, which made people suffer great repulsion when climbing the mountain. Moreover, one's cultivation wasn't at the reincarnation evolution stage, so it was utterly impossible to take another step forward. Because of this, numerous cultivators had no choice but to stop here. Hey, that guy seems to be a little like Demon Lin? Someone noticed Lin Sun's back and showed a strange expression, feeling that he was familiar. Is it really him? Many people were surprised. In the past 2 months, Lin Sun had been silent, as if he had disappeared from the world. Except for the battle with Chu Zhongtian, there was no news about him. Moreover, most people's attention was attracted by the great changes of the world and focused on those ancient freaks. Are you sure it's him? Many cultivators were very excited. Before the great changes of the world, Demon Lin was definitely a well-deserved figure of the young generation and was the focus of the world. If he really appeared here after 2 months, it would definitely cause a great sensation. Many cultivators approached to carefully identify Lin Sun and confirm his identity. Unfortunately, they were not strong enough to climb the mountain. Moreover, Lin Sun and others never looked back from beginning to end. Halfway up the mountain, there were pavilions, terraces, and towers, all of which were very old. At this time, there were already many cultivators sitting or standing in the field. On a higher peak, there was a Taoist altar surrounded by clouds, and some figures could be vaguely seen standing on it. As soon as Lin Sun and others arrived halfway up the mountain, they found that many people had already come to the field. Obviously, they were here to attend the party. With a quick glance, Lin Sun found that these people were all strong practitioners. It was a gathering of masters. After thinking about it, it was impossible to climb this mountain without reaching the reincarnation developing realm. Lin Sun searched for a while and didn't find Xiaoqinghe. After thinking for a while, he immediately found a remote corner and sat down, intending to listen to the discussion of the people in the field. Almost all the ancient freaks that have appeared until now are terrifying existences at the top level. They run amok in the world and defeat countless masters of the present age. It's really a shame. Someone sighed. The ancient freaks appeared out of nowhere and suppressed the talents of the present age, which naturally made people depressed. Do you think the ancient freaks are really invincible? Otherwise, how can any one of them win so many battles? Someone was very worried. Invincible? That's impossible. In the present age, there is no lack of people who can fight against these ancient freaks. It's just that they haven't made a move yet. For example, Yun Qi Bai, Wang Xuanyu, Yimof, Yan Zhanqiu, Demon God Lin, and so on. Which one of them isn't ridiculously powerful? Demon God Lin? Speaking of this person, he's really amazing. A month ago, Chu Zhongtian came into the world for the 4th time and immediately headed to the Star Chess Sea to suppress Demon God Lin. Who would have thought that he would be suppressed instead? If not for the protection of the old monster from the King Realm, he would have almost died. These people were talking about the situation of the world. Apart from this place halfway up the mountain, there were also many people talking on the Taoist altar at the peak of the mountain. Those people were even more powerful, and they were obviously people of extremely high status. Brother Qi, there's no need to be so humble. In the minor giants ranking, you defeated all the geniuses and made it into the top 10. It can be said that your achievements are remarkable, a woman on the Taoist altar at the peak of the mountain said with admiration. On the Taoist altar, a man in a blue robe sat on a cattail hassock with a calm expression. He said, "It's just the 10th place. It's nothing." Many people revealed astonished expressions as they recognized the man in the blue robe. He was the successor of the Sun Moon Shrine, Qi Chongdo. He was famous and was one of the top minor giants of the younger generation. At the same time, some of the cultivators on the mountainside listened attentively. They had respectful expressions, and their voices were much softer. Obviously, the experts on the Taoist altar at the peak of the mountain were of extraordinary status. Lin Sun looked over and found the man in the blue robe somewhat familiar. He quickly recalled Qi Chongdo's identity. He was Xiaoqinghe's senior brother, and his performance on the minor giants ranking was remarkable. "Do you know that guy?" Old Toad asked. "We've met, but we've never been in contact," Lin Sun said casually. Beside them, some people heard their conversation and could not help but sneer. "We've only met before. Is it worth showing off? You're still boasting shamelessly. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" Chapter 11:29. This was sarcasm directed at Lin Sun. Everyone could hear it. However, Old Toad and Ah Lu weren't angry. Instead, they were overjoyed. Their spirits were suddenly lifted, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Lin Sun cursed inwardly. He knew very well that neither Old Toad nor Ah Lu were easy to deal with. One was narcissistic and arrogant, while the other was born to talk and be good at attracting hatred. If he hadn't restrained himself along the way, who knew how much trouble they would have caused? Be careful. Don't cause trouble. Lin soon transmitted his voice and shot them a threatening glance. The two immediately became listless like frosted eggplant. At least you know your place, the person who had mocked them earlier commented with a reserved smile. Ordinary people really don't have the right to associate with those on the Taoist altar. They're all ruthless characters at the level of minor giants. They're not the same kind of people as you, someone else ridiculed. Some of us have also participated in the junior giants ranking competition, but we could only watch from afar. We were slightly weaker and couldn't even climb the immortal mountain. Many people nearby spoke up one after another, their words full of pride as well as awe and envy of those on the Taoist altar. Hearing this, Ah Lu couldn't help but sneer. You also participated in the junior giants ranking competition? Sorry for the disrespect. His expression did not conceal his contempt at all. There was no sense of disrespect, it was clearly mockery. Barbarians, I advise you to leave the mountain. Those who can participate in this gathering are all outstanding talents of the present age, someone said contemptuously, as if ashamed to be associated with them. Even Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. Then he shook his head and didn't bother to argue with them. They were just a bunch of blind fools. Go away. You're not welcome here. Someone reprimanded. Old Toad was very puzzled. He turned to Lin Sun and asked, who's lying? Since they've all participated in the junior giants ranking competition, why don't they recognize you? Lin Sun shrugged, indicating that he didn't know. Ah Lu grinned. It's simple. Someone is bragging. He hasn't participated in the junior giants ranking competition at all and is deliberately trying to flatter himself. Immediately, many cultivators' expressions became a little unnatural. You still aren't leaving? Someone was already angry, loudly berating. The commotion here instantly drew the attention of the cultivators halfway up the mountain, and even some people on the Dao platform at the peak of the mountain raised their eyebrows and looked over. That seems to be, someone was surprised. When he looked at Lin Sun, his face suddenly changed. Almost at the same time, on the mountain peak, Chi Chongdo let out a surprised voice. He suddenly stood up and said, You are, Chi Chongdo was one of the top figures of the younger generation and was ranked in the top 10 of the minor giants list. Seeing him so shocked, the other people on the Dao platform were also shocked. Then, when they saw Lin Sun's appearance, they were all shocked and stood up together. Demon God Lin. He actually came. The figures on the Dao platform were somewhat taken aback. They never expected that Fiend Celestial Lin would appear after 2 months of silence. Welcome, Brother Lin. Apologies for not going out to meet you. At this moment, Chi Chongdo had already rushed towards the mountainside. Brother Lin, please. The other people on the Taoist altar also cupped their fists and bowed respectfully. Demon God Lin. On the mountainside, those practitioners were all dumbfounded. That young man was Lin Sun, who was famous all over the world a few days ago. Those who had previously ridiculed and reprimanded Lin Sun were all stiff and their faces turned pale. They had never thought that the person they despised and banished would be such a horrible existence. Indeed, Lin Sun did not have any friendship with the people on the Taoist altar. It was not that he was weak, but that he was too strong. Similarly, not everyone knew Lin Sun. Gosh. He is Demon God Lin, number 1 on the minor giants list. Not long ago, he suppressed Chu Zhongtian and almost killed him. This area was not peaceful at all. It was boiling. All eyes were on Lin Sun. Many people gasped when they saw that even Ah Lu, a barbarian, was being treated with respect by Chi Chongdo. Birds of a feather flocked together. It could be foreseen that those who could walk with Demon God Lin could not be ordinary. Lin Sun, Brother Alu, and this fellow practitioner, please come to the Dao platform for a chat. Chi Chongdo invited them. Thanks a lot. Lin Sun smiled and cupped his hands, not making things difficult for those who had ridiculed him earlier. Old Toad and Alu also ignored those guys. Lin Sun was a little surprised. When did these two guys become so magnanimous? They're just a bunch of frogs in a well. Why bother with them? They're a disgrace to our status. Old Toad said proudly. That's very kind of you. Alu agreed. Lin Sun sighed inwardly, realizing that these two scourges no longer cared about ordinary people. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to choose their targets. Obviously, those people earlier weren't qualified to arouse their interest. The mountaintop was another scene. The Taoist altar was ancient and vast, surrounded by a sea of clouds. A waterfall poured down like a snow dragon, the mist curling up and the roar of thunder. More than a dozen practitioners were sitting cross-legged on the Taoist altar. There were men and women, and all of them had set foot on the top. Many of them were familiar faces to Lin Sun. They were all dazzling figures who had ranked in the top 36 on the minor giants list. However, when Lin Sun arrived, he immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. There was no other reason than that no one present could compare with Lin Sun, who ranked first on the minor giants list. Didn't you say that this gathering was organized by your sect's fellow Taoist Mi Hengzhen? Why isn't he here? Lin Sun asked. Chi Chongdo pondered for a moment, then said frankly, Taoist Lin, you may not know, but just 2 hours ago, Senior Brother Mi received a letter of challenge. I'm afraid he's fighting someone now. Everyone else was stunned when they heard this. Obviously, they hadn't heard about it before. Fighting someone? Who is it? Lin Sun was interested. He had long heard that Mi Hengzhen was really powerful. He was an outstanding figure among the veteran top giants, who had been famous for many years and was known as the leader of the younger generation of Sun Moon Temple. Such a person could be called one of the strongest among the current generation, but someone actually dared to send a letter of challenge to fight him. This was naturally curious. It's an ancient freak called Bai Longting. He has been silent for 8,000 years. He's a descendant of the White Flood Dragon bloodline, and is also known as the Sixth Prince. Chi Chongdo's expression became solemn. This person is extremely terrible. He was born half a month ago, and now there are no less than 10 contemporary top figures who have been defeated by him. The atmosphere in the field became heavy, and the faces of other practitioners changed slightly. Obviously, they all knew how terrible Bai Longting was. Is fellow Taoist Mi Hengzhen sure of winning? Lin Sun asked. Chi Chongdo smiled bitterly. Senior Brother Mi said that he agreed to this battle because he didn't feel sure of winning. If it were someone else, Senior Brother Mi would definitely ignore it. Lin Sun nodded and roughly judged that Bai Longting should be an extremely powerful figure since Mi Hengzhen valued him so much. The White Flood Dragon bloodline? Old Toad suddenly said. Everyone looked at him, thinking that Old Toad had learned something. Unexpectedly, he sneered and shook his head. I only know True Dragon, Chiwen, Flying Serpent and King Jiao, but I've never heard of the White Flood Dragon bloodline. Even if it's a flood dragon, I'm afraid it's nothing. Everyone was speechless for a while. This green-robed teenager was really arrogant. If they hadn't seen Old Toad sitting next to Lin Sun, someone would have refuted him. Are ancient freaks really so powerful? Lin Sun asked. He wanted to hear the opinions of these top figures. To be honest, Brother Lin, those who can be called ancient freaks are at least the top figures at the top level. Their combat power is indeed ridiculously powerful. Chu Zhongtian, for example, has also been in silence and closed-door training, but he can only be called a genius, not qualified to be called an ancient freak. Chi Chongdo explained patiently, right now we have basically reached a conclusion, which is that the ancient freak's attainments on the ultimate path of cultivation must have crossed the 2 stages of getting to know the rudiments and entering the next level, and they have stepped into reaching the peak. Lin Sun suddenly understood. Because he had walked on this road, he also knew how powerful the top figures of the Reach the Peak were. Brother Lin, during the period when you were in closed-door training, there were many ancient freaks who wanted to fight with you, someone said. Yes, some people even clamored to capture you and make you their slave. Their attitude was extremely arrogant and unbridled. Someone said angrily. Lin Sun smiled and said, "It's just a group of cats and dogs clamoring. You don't have to pay attention to them." There was a sudden silence here. Everyone was speechless and shocked by this sentence. This was too strong and fierce. He regarded ancient freaks as cats and dogs. Looking at the world, only demon god Lin dared to say such words. Everyone also knew that Lin Sun was most famous for his unbridled courage in addition to his heaven-defying combat power. He dared to do what others dared not. Brother Lin, please be careful with your words. Some ancient freaks are very likely to come here, and they are bound to come with bad intentions. Chi Chongdo sighed. After the news that they were holding the Thousand Stream Grand Meeting came out, it caused a great response, and no one knew how many people were paying attention to it. For example, 4 hours ago, when Mi Huang was really on this Taoist altar to entertain his fellow practitioners, he suddenly received a letter of challenge from White Dragon Court, so he had to go to fight. What are you afraid of? I can't wait for a few ancient freaks to jump out, Old Toad said disapprovingly, very conceited and arrogant. Everyone was speechless for a while. Who was this guy? He was too arrogant. Even if they didn't like the ancient freaks, some things couldn't be said like this. Otherwise, it was very likely to cause big trouble. It was also at this moment that there was a sudden uproar and restlessness at the foot of the mountain, and then a cold and indifferent voice sounded. What Thousand Stream Grand Meeting? I thought it was something amazing, but it turns out that it's just a group of chickens and dogs. How disappointing! The voice was like thunder, surging up and could be heard from far and near. It couldn't be. Were there really ancient freaks looking for trouble? Chapter 1130. On the rugged mountain path, 8 red-robed men were opening up the path at the front while a treasured carriage was behind them. The 8 red-robed men had different appearances, yet their auras were extremely formidable. They were like Asuras that had just walked out from a mountain of corpses and an ocean of blood, and their footsteps were steady as they ascended the mountain path, as if they were walking on flat ground. The treasured carriage rumbled as it moved forward while flickering with shocking divine radiance. Everywhere it passed, space split apart while flowing with multicolored light, and it was an extremely shocking scene. In the time of a few breaths, their group had arrived halfway up the mountain. All the cultivators there gasped because the auras emanated by the 8 red-robed men were formidable to the extreme, and they pressed down upon many to the point it was difficult for them to even breathe. But the most shocking was the treasured carriage. It seemed as if it was constructed from 7-colored divine iron and flowed with dark light, and it actually dispersed the energy of the Grand Tao on the mountain and was impossible to obstruct. This was a rare treasure that had the ancient calamity diagram inscribed on it, and there was even the scene of a myriad of spirits worshipping the heavens and the earth. Along with the arrival of this treasured carriage, the nearby space cracked apart while numerous black-colored rifts appeared, and it was a terrifying scene. Such a formation was too formidable. It was like a monstrous figure had arrived, and it caused the hearts of many cultivators to tremble while their expressions changed indeterminately. Even the pupils of Chi Chongdo and the others constricted while they revealed serious expressions. A treasured carriage. This is the carriage of the descendant of the Golden King Snake, Jin Xiaoming. Someone recognized the identity of this person and warned everyone via voice transmission. Instantly, the expressions of Chi Chongdo and the others changed. Jin Xiaoming is an ancient freak. He's extremely famous in the recent period of time, and he's caused countless disturbances. Obviously, after news of the Thousand Streams gathering this time spread, it had drawn over ancient freaks, and they'd come with ill intent. In fact, along with the shocking changes in the heavens and the earth, so long as a gathering of the experts of the younger generation was held, there would be ancient freaks arriving to provoke them. Because of this, countless young geniuses from the four dimensions had been suppressed and humiliated by these ancient freaks. It wasn't exaggerated to say that during this period of time, the geniuses of this generation were practically on the verge of losing face, and they were on the verge of being suppressed by these ancient freaks to the point of being unable to raise their heads. At this moment, Jin Xiaoming had arrived in a treasured carriage with 8 red-robed battle servants, so it was bound to be impossible for him to have an exchange and discussion about the Tao. "May I know why all of you have come?" Someone took a deep breath and asked in a low voice, and he seemed to be extremely reserved and fearful. "I heard that this 1,000-flow banquet is hosted by me Hengzhen, but now it seems disappointing. It's just a gathering of a bunch of chickens and dogs." An indifferent and cold voice resounded from within the treasured carriage. The treasured carriage was covered by a curtain, so it was impossible to see the true appearance of the owner within. The atmosphere instantly became silent. There was simply no need to ask to know that these people had come with ill intentions and were intentionally looking for trouble. Many people's faces darkened. Lin Sun was also a little surprised. Was this the style of ancient freaks? He was truly arrogant. "Where's Mi Hengzhen? Have him come out and see me." The cold and indifferent voice resounded once more from within the treasured carriage. "Senior brother Mi isn't here for the time being. If there's nothing else, please leave. This gathering doesn't welcome outsiders." Qi Chengdo took a deep breath and ordered his guest to leave. "That's right, we don't welcome you. Please leave." The others spoke up one after another. Their faces were filled with extreme fear and undisguised rejection. "Noisy!" Suddenly, the cold and indifferent voice shouted loudly like a thunderclap that rumbled as it swept out. It didn't just suppress the voices in the surroundings, it even caused the ears of many cultivators to buzz while the vital blood in their bodies roiled. "What? Do all of you dare to commit murder?" Qi Chengdo's face sank. "Murder? No, I just came to test exactly how capable all of you fellows who boast about yourselves to be experts are." The person within the treasured carriage spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, 8 red-robed men stood out. Their gazes were like blades as they swept the surroundings, and they emanated a strand of terrifying baleful aura. "I won't bully all of you. Feel free to choose anyone to fight any one of these 8 servants of mine. If you don't agree, then you can't continue holding this gathering." The indifferent voice from within the treasured carriage revealed a strand of contempt. At this moment, the expressions of Qi Chengdo and the other cultivators sank, and they were extremely embarrassed. There was no lack of absolute giants that had ascended onto the minor giants' rankings amongst them, yet they were being looked down upon like this. The host didn't show himself and actually wanted his servants to fight. Damn it! Someone gritted his teeth. This was absolutely a form of humiliation because asking his servants to fight was undoubtedly the greatest form of contempt towards all of them. "Are you disgruntled?" A red-robed man's voice was cold and fierce. "With your identities and strengths, all of you are utterly unworthy of sparring with my master. The 8 of us are more than enough to deal with all of you." These words were too overbearing. A single combat servant dared to look down upon all of them, so it was impossible for anyone to not be infuriated. The expressions of all of them were extremely gloomy. Old Toad and Ah Lu were slightly unable to continue watching. However, they were stopped by Lin Sun. They couldn't usurp the host's position at a time like this, and the important matter at hand was to see Qi Chengdo's decision. "Feel free to stand out if you're disgruntled. All of you boast about being the top figures of this generation. Could it be that all of you don't even have the courage to fight?" The red-robed man in the lead sneered. His figure was tall, his eyes were long and narrow, and his entire body emanated an extremely dense baleful aura that was extremely terrifying. Everyone present was disgruntled in their hearts and extremely infuriated. A single combat servant dares to flaunt his might? Someone couldn't restrain himself right away and said, "I'll fight you." This was a young man in a black robe. He held a silver trident in his hand, and he was an extremely dazzling genius. Everyone's spirits were refreshed when they saw him attack, and all of them wished for nothing more than for him to display his invincible might and properly crush the other party's prestige. "You're no good." The red-robed man was disdainful and spoke casually. Clang! The young man in a black robe's expression was icy cold. He didn't waste his breath at all as he waved the silver trident, and it tore open space and swept up a terrifying divine radiance as it slashed towards the red-robed man. Bang! The red-robed man soared up and transformed into a terrifying bolt of blood-red lightning that charged up explosively and launched an intense battle. However, after merely over 10 moves, a bang resounded as the silver trident was smashed flying. On the other hand, the neck of the black-robed man was grabbed by the red-robed man, and with a light twist, his head was twisted off. Swish! A rain of blood sprayed out like a fountain. "You're really weak." The red-robed man's expression was cold as he casually tossed away the black-robed man's corpse, and he didn't even spare it a glance. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone was agitated by this bloody scene, causing their expressions to change while their minds were shaken. All of them had never imagined that a mere combat servant would actually be so formidable. This truly caused them to be furious and terrified, and they were unable to calm down. "You dare kill?" Chichongdo was furious. "What? If you're disgruntled, then we can fight." The red-robed man spoke indifferently. "Allow me." Someone was unable to endure it any longer. This was a black-robed young man that was ranked in the top 36 of the minor giants, and he'd already stepped into the ranks of the absolute path towards the Tao. Bang! As soon as he attacked, he revealed extraordinary combat strength. A violet sun illuminated the sky as it smashed down towards the red-robed man. However, the red-robed man was extremely formidable as well, and he charged over without the slightest hesitation to enter into battle with the black-robed man. In the time of a few breaths, the two of them had already exchanged over 100 blows. The red-robed man's palm slashed horizontally, and with a pu sound, he forcefully chopped off the black-robed man's arm. Swoosh! The black-robed man had no choice but to dodge and leave the battlefield, and his expression had already become livid and extremely unsightly. "Are you afraid? You really are trash." The red-robed man sneered. All the spectators were shocked and furious. Even a peak figure on the minor giants isn't a match for him? This was beyond their expectations, and their hearts turned cold. For a moment, many people looked at Chichongdo, and then at Lin Sun. Chichongdo took a deep breath, and a touch of determination appeared on his face. Now that Mi Heng was really not here, he was the host of this Thousand Streams grand meeting. In the face of such a situation, he naturally had to stand up. However, before he could act, he was stopped by Lin Sun, who said, "Even if you win, you'll only win a battle servant, which will be a loss of face." Chichongdo was stunned. At this time, the red-robed servant looked at Lin Sun with a grim smile and said, "If you're disgruntled, you can come down and fight me. I promise you'll die a terrible death." Everyone looked at Lin Sun in unison. This was Demon God Lin. Among all the people present, Lin Sun was the strongest. If he took the lead, they might really be able to resolve the current predicament. But Lin Sun smiled slightly, turned his head, and waved at the old toad. "Hurry up, it's your turn." The old toad's eyes widened and he stamped his feet. "You want me to fight a servant? I can't afford to lose face like this. If anyone wants to go, it should be this barbarian." As he spoke, he looked at Alu, who hurriedly shook his head. "No, no, even you don't want to fight those servants. If I go, won't it damage my reputation?" Everyone was stunned, and their faces were full of black lines. Why were they still arguing about this at a time like this? "Old Toad, this kind of trash is the most suitable for you to fight. If I go, I'll obviously be bullying them, Alu advised. The old toad was furious and shouted, "Is this kind of trash worthy of me fighting? This is clearly a humiliation to my dignity." The dispute between the two stunned the red-robed man. Then his face darkened, and his eyes were about to burn. How dare the other side ignore him like this? "Why don't you two come together?" he shouted. "Shut up! Noisy!" Both the old toad and Alu were very dissatisfied, and they scolded the red-robed man, making the latter's face darken even more. Seeing that the two were about to argue again, Lin Sun said in a threatening tone, "Old toad, are you going or not?" The old toad looked reluctant, but finally compromised and said grumpily, "Fine, I'll give you face." Then, when he turned his head to look at the red-robed man, he said impatiently with a helpless and disgusted look, "Tell me, do you want to commit suicide by cutting your own throat, or do you want me to send you off in person? Choose a way to die." His words were very arrogant, even more arrogant than the red-robed man and his master. Everyone's eyes widened in bewilderment. Who on earth was this green-robed little brother? He seemed to be very powerful. The red-robed man named by the old toad was so angry that his face was as black as a pot. Overflowing with killing intent, he gritted his teeth and said, "Cut the crap, get down here and die." "Hee, did you hear that? I'm telling you to die." Alu laughed, as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Chapter 11:31. The red-robed man was tall and strong. Although he was a battle servant, he was exceptionally strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to defeat the top figures on the minor giants list so easily. Seeing the old toad charging at him, he gave a hideous smile and said, "You're as pretty as a girl. Then I'll destroy your face first." Boom! As he stepped into the void, his aura suddenly soared. His whole body emitted a terrifying murderous intent, causing the void to become chaotic. Behind him, Lin Sun said unhurriedly, "Old toad," he said, "you're a girl. Don't be afraid." This was simply adding fuel to the fire, and it was not a small matter. The old toad hated it the most when people compared him to women. "Don't worry, I'll definitely kill this blind beast." The old toad was so angry that its hair stood on end. Golden all over, it let out a long howl and charged forward. Everyone present had strange expressions. This green-robed young man had been very arrogant from the beginning, but could he really do it? No one was sure, but the battle had already begun. Boom! The old toad waved its palm and fingers, swallowing the sun and moon and drawing on the terrifying power of the universe. At first, the red-robed man didn't think much of it, but when he saw this scene, his expression instantly turned serious as he realized how powerful it was. Blood refining the sky. He shouted and pressed his palm and fingers into the void. Blood-colored light burst forth like a surging tide, creating a scene of destruction like a landslide or a tsunami. Bang! A deafening collision resounded. The red-robed man twitched as if struck by lightning and staggered back several steps. His expression changed abruptly and became even more solemn. "You dare challenge me with just this little ability? Killing you would only dirty my hands," the old toad said disdainfully. Only then did everyone realize that this arrogant green-robed young man was actually an extremely powerful expert. Humph! The red-robed man's expression was cold as he took out a huge blood-colored sword. His aura instantly soared to the extreme, and the aura of the Great Path rumbled like a bloodthirsty azura. "Kill!" He charged forward in large strides, causing the entire world to tremble. The sword light swept down like a blood-colored waterfall, and the faint cries of gods and demons could be heard. It was a terrifying scene. Boom! At the same time, Old Toad had already charged out. He wore a green robe, had a handsome and charming appearance, and his eyes were bright and golden. With a wave of his hand, the shocking scene of the sun sinking, the moon being destroyed, and the stars collapsing appeared. In the blink of an eye, he was already engaged in a fierce battle with the red-robed man. This friend is very powerful. Chi Chongdo was surprised. He's also an ancient freak, Lin Sun said casually. Chi Chongdo was taken aback. Then, he sucked in a breath of cold air. An ancient freak was actually by demon god Lin's side and even acted like he was following his lead. This was too shocking. Suddenly, a wave of cheers erupted in the surroundings. Chi Chongdo looked over and saw that the battle had only just begun. The red-robed man was already completely suppressed and had no strength to resist. On the other hand, the old toad's imposing manner was like a rainbow, and its entire body was bright gold. It was like a dazzling god of war that pointed at the heavens and smashed the earth with boundless might. Pooh! The red-robed man was beaten to the point he couldn't restrain himself from coughing up blood, and his expression became unsightly. He'd never imagined that he would actually encounter such a tough fellow. Trash! Who gave you the courage to come here looking for trouble? The old toad's expression was arrogant and disdainful, and its attacks were extremely ruthless. Like a torrential storm, it firmly sealed off the other party's retreat and suppressed him to the point where he almost couldn't raise his head. The cheers in the surroundings grew more and more enthusiastic as everyone cheered for the old toad. This made the old toad even more pleased with itself, and it was also in high spirits during the battle. In the blink of an eye, the red-robed man had been beaten black and blue, and his body was covered in palm marks. His clothes were ragged and he looked extremely miserable. Even a blind man could see that the red-robed man had no chance of turning the tables. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Although this green-robed little brother looked a little arrogant, he had the capital to be so. Seeing the old toad's invincible display of might, Alu couldn't bear to watch any longer and shouted, "He's just a nobody. Why go through so much effort? Don't you think it's embarrassing, old toad?" The old toad was instantly disgusted. It felt that Alu's mouth was too much of a killjoy. Embarrassing? Then I'll let a barbarian like you witness my true abilities. Suddenly, the old toad let out a loud shout, and its fingers formed a strange and cryptic hand seal. In an instant, a dazzling light burst forth, as if it was holding the sun and the moon in its hand. An indescribably terrifying aura spread out from the old toad's body. Many people felt a stabbing pain in their eyes, and they couldn't see clearly anymore. Not good. The expressions of the other 7 red-robed men who had been watching the battle all changed slightly when they saw this. At the same time, the red-robed man's hair stood on end. He had already been bitterly holding on earlier and had been on the verge of collapse from the suppression. Now that he saw that the old toad was obviously going to use a killing move, he was so shocked that he couldn't care less about anything else. With a roar, he planned to flee. But he was already one step too late. Boom! Inside the incomparably dazzling sun-moon seal, the red-robed man didn't even have time to struggle before his body was engulfed by the blazing light of the Tao. Several red-robed men made a move, trying to stop everything from happening. But at the same time, Alu also made a move. His towering figure swept across the battlefield, shaking the heavens and the earth. He was only one person, but he had blocked the attacks of several people. His swift and tyrannical power left many people dumbfounded. In the end, the dazzling rain of light dissipated, and the tall red-robed man was completely killed. Not even his corpse was left behind as he turned into ashes. Who knew that the old toad would be very unhappy? Who asked a barbarian like you to interfere? They're just a bunch of trash. Do you think they can hurt me? Don't flatter yourself. I wasn't trying to save you. My hands were just itching. Alu sneered. In the distance, the expressions of the red-robed men turned ugly. As for Chi Chongdo and the other cultivators present, they were extremely excited. Old Toad and Alu had successfully defeated the other party and suppressed their arrogance. This made them very happy. Everyone, don't be too happy just yet. Let me destroy these pieces of trash one by one first. The old toad's tone was very arrogant as it stared at the other 7 red-robed men. Let me do it. With a roar, Alu had already taken the lead and rushed forward. From his posture, it was clear that he was going to challenge the 7 red-robed men alone. So fierce. A delicate woman screamed excitedly. You're too shameless, barbarian. Who asked you to fight with me? The old toad was flustered and exasperated. It didn't hesitate to attack, for fear that the old toad would steal its chance to show off. The other cultivators were shocked and dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Earlier, that group of people had arrived in an overbearing manner, treating all of them as if they were nothing. Their words were filled with disdain, bringing them great humiliation. But now, the situation had been reversed all of a sudden. In the eyes of Alu and the old toad, the red-robed servants were like a group of prey that they were fighting to divide up. It was really a little too cruel. These two friends are really heroic. Chichongdo felt dizzy and his mind was blank. Previously, he had been worried that the 1,000-flow grand gathering would encounter a crisis and be trampled and destroyed, but now it seemed that everything had changed. It can't be helped. They've been holding it in for too long. Now that they finally have the chance, they have to vent. Lin Sun shrugged. Chichongdo hummed and muttered inwardly, no wonder they could become friends with demon god Lin. It turned out that these two guys were also like devil incarnate. But why didn't they want to fight before? Chichongdo couldn't help asking. It's not that I'm unwilling, it's that I don't care. Although these two guys have bad tempers, they still care a lot about their pride and reputation. Chichongdo was speechless. When he looked at the battlefield again, a shameless battle was already taking place. Old Toad and Alu were like tigers that had entered a pack of wolves. Although they were fighting against 7 red-robed servants, they weren't at a disadvantage at all. This made all the cultivators more and more excited. They cheered for the two of them, and many women looked at them with infatuation in their eyes. Puff. Before long, Alu killed a red-robed servant first and couldn't help sighing. Alas, they're too weak. They're nothing more than killing chickens and monkeys. Although he said so, he was beaming with joy. Old Toad gnashed his teeth in annoyance and became more and more ruthless. Puff. Soon, Old Toad also killed a red-robed servant. He flicked his fingers and sighed with the posture of a lonely master. Now I understand what it means to be lonely at the top. The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched. He couldn't bear to see their pretentious posture anymore. But surprisingly, the other cultivators revealed fervent expressions, and they felt extreme reverence towards the two of them. Moreover, the cheers and cheers grew even louder. Puff. It didn't take long for Alu to kill another one. But then Old Toad also killed an opponent. The two of them seemed to be competing and comparing. Neither was willing to submit to the other, and they would even quarrel occasionally, causing the originally bloody and terrifying battle to have a slightly strange feeling. Enough! Suddenly, an indifferent and cold voice rang out in the golden chariot which had been silent. Then, a rainbow of 7 colors burst out around the chariot and spread to the battlefield. Old Toad and Alu were shocked and chose to retreat without hesitation. Puff, puff. The rainbow of 7 colors swept out and killed the remaining 2 red-robed servants in one fell swoop. Blood rained on the battlefield. Before death, the 2 servants were stunned and confused. It seemed that they couldn't believe that it was their master who killed them in the end. At the same time, the cheers in the field stopped abruptly. Everyone's face changed abruptly and a chill ran down their spine. They were shocked by this cruel and bloody scene. Indeed, no one had expected that the master of the chariot would be so cruel to his servants. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes, and Chichongdo's face also became dignified. A bunch of good-for-nothings. They can't even do a little thing well. It's useless to keep them alive. In the cold and indifferent voice, the curtain covering the chariot rolled up silently. Then, a tall and imposing figure walked out of it. It was a young man in a blood-red robe with a jasper belt around his waist. His long golden hair was as bright as the sun, hanging down his back. His skin was a strange pale color. His eyes were deep, and his pupils were glowing with a strange and frightening green light. As soon as he appeared, the aura he exuded made the world tremble and the weather change. Chapter 1132. A blood-red robe, golden hair, and green eyes. Coupled with the strange pale skin, this young man exuded a demonic and terrifying aura. He was very strong. As soon as he appeared, the atmosphere in this world was oppressive, and the wind and clouds surged. He was like a dragon coming out of the abyss, shocking the world. Many practitioners present felt it difficult to breathe. They couldn't help but be shocked, and their expressions changed when they looked at this blood-red robed young man. This man is Jin Xiaoming, an ancient freak of the Golden King Snake. Since his appearance, he has suppressed more than a dozen contemporary peerless figures and has never been defeated. Qi Chengdo's expression was solemn, and he quickly told Lin Sun the details of this man. Lin Sun nodded with a calm expression. He also noticed that this Jin Xiaoming's momentum was extremely extraordinary, and he had a unique momentum of a giant. Along with Jin Xiaoming's appearance, the atmosphere in the field was oppressive and tense, and there was a dead silence. Many practitioners were extremely afraid of him. It should be noted that the 8 blood-robed battle servants were all extremely tyrannical and powerful enough to suppress peerless figures at the level of a small giant. They were stronger than most of the practitioners present. But it was precisely such an expert that was casually killed by Jin Xiaoming, and Jin Xiaoming had taken him to be a good-for-nothing. This kind of bloody and brutal means was undoubtedly too shocking. Finally, an interesting opponent has appeared. Alu's eyes were bright, and there was a blazing fighting spirit surging in his heart. This guy is mine. Don't fight with me. Old Toad shouted with an excited expression. Humph! You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Seeing this, Jin Xiaoming snorted coldly with an indifferent and cold expression. You two don't have to clamor. I'll send you to hell one by one. Then he looked at Lin Sun and said, Are you demon god Lin? His words were sonorous and carried a touch of killing intent. Everyone's heart trembled. Just listening to his voice made them feel a kind of incomparably oppressive and killing intent. Yes. Lin Sun nodded. Jin Xiaoming pointed at Old Toad and Alu and asked again, Are these your battle servants? Immediately, Old Toad and Alu were unhappy and shouted, What the hell are you talking about? We're brothers. Jin Xiaoming said expressionlessly, There's no difference. You're all going to die anyway. It's just that the two of you aren't qualified to fight me. Speaking of this, he looked at Lin Sun with his green eyes again and said, I'll give you a chance to recognize me as your master. As long as you are loyal to me, I can consider taking you into the absolute summit domain and seize the great fortune together. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere and the surroundings became even more oppressive and deathly silent. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Although Jin Xiaoming was alone, he looked down on everyone else, not even Old Toad and Alu. Furthermore, he had bluntly declared that he wanted to take Fiend Celestial Lin in as a slave. Too arrogant. Similarly, this was undoubtedly a blatant insult to Demon God Lin. One had to know that Fiend God Lin was the current generation's #1 minor powerhouse. He was a pinnacle figure that everyone in the world knew. If news of him being reduced to a slave were to spread, how would the world view him? But it just so happened that Jin Xiaoming spoke as if it was a matter of course, and this already wasn't as simple as arrogance. Old Toad and Alu also widened their eyes, as if they couldn't believe their ears. They had seen crazy people, but they had never seen anyone this crazy. Who gave this guy the courage? Did he really think he could be lawless just because he was an ancient freak? Damn it, this is the first time I've seen someone even crazier than me. Old Toad's expression was very ugly. He felt that this guy had overshadowed his limelight, which made him extremely unhappy. It's not crazy, it's very annoying, Alu said in a low, muffled voice. Big brother, let me help you deal with this green-eyed, golden-haired thief. That won't do. As Lin Sun spoke, he had already floated down and stood in front of Alu, saying, "Let me do it." Lin Sun couldn't bear Jin Xiaoming's arrogant attitude any longer. But more importantly, he wanted to see what this ancient freak was and why he dared to be so arrogant. "Alas, stop fighting. Let me do it. I'm the best at dealing with this kind of trash," Old Toad said and was about to rush out. However, Lin Sun held him down and scolded him, "Stay here. Just let me do it," Alu yelled with an excited expression. Lin Sun grabbed Alu's lapel and said, "You stay back too. It's not easy to catch an ancient freak. Let me study him first." The three of them were arguing, which made other practitioners stare blankly and stupefied. Were they fighting over Jin Xiaoming because he was a delicious cake? Jin Xiaoming looked indifferent, but everyone could see that the killing intent between his eyebrows was getting stronger and stronger, and his eyes seemed to be burning with green flames. He really didn't expect that Lin Sun would dare to treat him like this and not take him seriously at all. Since he was born, who dared to look down on him when he walked all over the world? None of the contemporary peerless figures suppressed by him could withstand more than 10 moves. "No need to fight. You're all going to die today." Jin Xiaoming's words were like spring thunder. He stretched out his arm and grasped. A horrible crack in the void appeared and spread towards Lin Sun at an amazing speed. He wanted to kill Lin Sun and teach everyone a bloody lesson. Boom! At the same time, he stepped forward as if the ground had shrunk to an inch. His fingers shot out like swords, intending to pierce Lin Sun's head. Everyone cried out in alarm. It was too fast. In an instant, the void there was drowned by blazing green light while the sound of the Tao rumbled, and the entire Thousand Streams spirit mountain trembled violently. Undoubtedly, Jin Xiaoming was extremely terrifying. As soon as he attacked, he revealed a combat strength that was far more formidable than those blood-red battle servants. When he saw this, Lin Sun didn't retreat but moved forward instead. A wisp of a cold sheen flashed in his black eyes as he clenched his fist and greeted Jin Xiaoming's attack. This caused Old Toad and Alu to stomp their feet with rage, but they disdained to bully Lin Sun with numbers, so they could only move aside and allow Lin Sun and Jin Xiaoming to fight. Rumble! Their fists and palms collided, causing divine radiance to erupt, and a terrifying aftershock spread out, causing the minds of some nearby practitioners to shake and almost cough up blood. All of them retreated endlessly in astonishment. "Your strength isn't bad." Jin Xiaoming's pupils constricted as he revealed a strange expression, and he was slightly excited because he knew he'd encountered an opponent that could fight him. "Unfortunately, you're too weak," replied Lin Sun. His pupils were deep and calm like an abyss. Merely a single strike allowed him to know that this was a formidable opponent. "Haha! You're the first person that dares speak to me like this. Before I kill you, I'll give you a chance to reconsider becoming a battle servant." Jin Xiaoming roared with laughter as his golden hair fluttered, and then he took a step forward and launched a lethal attack. This was an ancient freak with an extremely murderous aura, and his methods were unyielding and overbearing. Bang! The two of them separated after another strike, and then the space here exploded into pieces while the ground trembled violently, causing sand and rocks to fly into the air. "Humph! Do you dare come up here and fight me?" Jin Xiaoming suddenly soared into the sky and arrived beneath the sky. Earlier on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain, it caused him to be unable to utilize his fists and legs. Why wouldn't I? Lin Sun soared into the sky like a fiend god that had descended to the world, and he executed the profundities of the 9 strikes for shaking the heavens, causing the nearby layer of clouds to be shattered and the space to explode apart. On the other hand, Jin Xiaoming's combat methods were similarly peerlessly ferocious. Every single move he made caused a green glow to shoot into the sky while the tune of the Tao rumbled and shook the world. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky was covered in blazing divine radiance that caused space to warp, and it was like 2 gods were in battle, causing the scene to be shocking. It wasn't just the people on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain that were paying attention to this. At this moment, there were countless cultivators at the foot of the mountain that were alarmed, and they shot their gazes towards the sky. How terrifying! It really is Fiend God Lin. After 2 months, he's finally made an appearance. Who's his opponent? How could he be so terrifying? Jin Xiaoming of the Golden Cobra lineage. What? He's actually an ancient freak? The sounds of discussion resounded without end, and this place was completely seething with excitement. In the sky, the two of them were locked in battle in midair while rays of light rumbled, and it was like numerous volcanoes were erupting in the sky, causing the blazing scene to be extremely shocking. Besides this, there was also multicolored divine radiance scattering down like a meteor shower that burned the sky, and it was an extremely magnificent scene. This was a battle at the peak. It was an unprecedented battle between peerless figures at the peak. In the recent period of time, numerous ancient freaks have appeared out of thin air, and they've rarely suffered defeat. They've crushed the geniuses of this generation to the point they're almost unable to raise their heads. This time, will Fiend God Lin be able to break through all of this and win this battle? I hope he wins. But it's really difficult to say. This battle quickly drew the attention of everyone, and they were paying close attention to it. Rumble! A strand of dispersed divine radiance descended to the ground and incinerated the ground, and it directly transformed an area of 300 m in the surroundings into ash. It was obvious how terrifying the strength revealed in this battle was. I never expected that you've actually stepped foot on the path to the peak of perfection at such an age. You've truly surprised me. In the sky, Jin Xiaoming was slightly astounded, and he felt apprehensive in his heart. There are many things that you've never imagined. Don't think that you can look down on everyone in the world just because you've been silent for a period of time. If you're unable to satisfy me today, then just wait to be annihilated. Lin Sun was slightly displeased and frowned. Jin Xiaoming was clearly an ancient freak, yet after he probed him, he noticed that Jin Xiaoming didn't seem to be as extremely terrifying as he'd imagined. Are you courting death? I'll fulfill your wish. Shocking killing intent erupted from Jin Xiaoming's entire body as he circulated his own Dao and technique, causing his figure to be like a bolt of lightning that was all-powerful and overbearing to the extreme. In fact, he was still extremely shocked in his heart. He'd heard of Lin Sun's reputation and accomplishments in battle in the past, and he'd originally thought that Lin Sun was only a young man that was ranked first on the minor tycoon ranking and wasn't a top tycoon, so Lin Sun didn't pose much of a threat. Never had he imagined that the combat strength Lin Sun revealed would completely exceed his expectations. Bang! In the sky, the situation of the battle was even more shocking. Wind and lightning surged there while phenomena occurred frequently, and a peerlessly intense battle was being carried out. Boundless divine radiance and Tao light collided there as various peerless combat techniques were displayed, and it caused countless cultivators to be astounded. Even all the cultivators on the mountain were dumbstruck. They could be considered to be outstanding geniuses amongst their peers, yet when compared with the two people that were fighting fiercely in the sky, the gap was too wide. Bang! Not long after, Lin Sun's fist suddenly erupted, causing a dazzling light to rumble as it instantly blasted Jin Xiaoming, who'd charged towards Lin Sun flying. Jin Xiaoming staggered, and it was uncomfortable to the point he almost coughed up blood. At the same time, Lin Sun said with a displeased expression, "Is that all you've got? Are you an ancient freak or not?" Everyone was shocked to the point they almost bit their tongues when they heard this. Is Demon God Lin expressing his displeasure by saying that his opponent is too weak? Chapter 1133. Demon God Lin. He's really ferocious to the point of being a complete mess. It was just a single sentence, but it caused the emotions of everyone present to surge. Shock and admiration filled their faces. In the past, Lin Sun was famous for his courage and fearlessness, and he'd caused numerous disturbances in the West Horizontal and Dongxing realms, and he was called the Demon God. However, recently, the world seemed to have become a stage for various ancient monstrous geniuses to lead the way and display their abilities. Moreover, Lin Sun had always been silent, so the world thought he was putting his own safety first. Who would have imagined that when he fought with Jin Xiaoming today, he would actually be even more graceful than before, and he even despised Jin Xiaoming for being too weak. Alas, he's stolen all the limelight, Old Toad sighed. Alu patted his shoulder and comforted. He's the big brother after all. How can we steal his limelight? Damn you, Lin Sun! Jin Xiaoming shouted coldly, and he was infuriated to the point his killing intent shot into the sky. Green light shot into the sky and blotted out the sun. When had he ever been humiliated like this since he was born? Moreover, he was despised for being too weak, and this caused him to be almost driven mad with rage. Bang! In the sky, Jin Xiaoming withdrew a broadsword that flowed with golden Taoist markings, and it was peerlessly dazzling as it charged forward. Its might was even more shocking, and it was extremely ferocious. Bang! Lin Sun's fist force was simple, earth-shattering, and all-conquering. No matter how Jin Xiaoming attacked, it was all crushed and blasted apart by his fist force. I really wonder if you're an ancient freak. Why are you so weak? Lin Sun frowned, and he couldn't restrain himself any longer. Earlier, he thought he'd found a peerless enemy, and he intended to use this to speculate the resources of those ancient freaks in the world. But up until this point in the battle, even though the strength Jin Xiaoming exerted was formidable, it was unable to bring too much threat to Lin Sun. This caused Lin Sun to be slightly disappointed, and he didn't intentionally humiliate and ridicule Jin Xiaoming. I'll kill you. Jin Xiaoming's expression instantly became livid and gloomy to the extreme, and he was on the verge of exploding from rage. As a peak figure of the Golden Cobra clan, he'd already attained the attaining perfection level in his path towards the Tao a very long time ago, and he possessed reserves that were sufficient to be proud of. Who would have imagined that he'd be repeatedly humiliated by Lin Sun like this? How could he not be furious? Boom! Suddenly, incomparably dense sword lights appeared in the sky. They were peerlessly sharp, and they spread out in the sky. There were thousands of them, and they resounded like a torrent of swords. This was Jin Xiaoming's killer move, sword intent like the tide, sword light like the sea. Every sword gleam was like a powerful sword cultivator. Tens of thousands of sword gleams were like an army of sword cultivators appearing. It was a terrifying sight. Finally, Lin Sun sensed the danger, but he was happy instead of frightened. He let out a light howl as he circulated the energy in his entire body, and then he smashed out over 1,000 punches in succession in an instant. They were like numerous enormous dragons that soared into the sky, and they coiled around the world and filled the heavens and the earth. Bang bang bang! Sword radiance shot out and fist force rumbled, clashing in the void. The scene immediately became terrifying, causing the entire region to be submerged in turbulence. Some sword lights were blocked, but some still tore through the sky and rushed to Lin Sun. 9 mysterious and obscure tribulations of different shapes appeared around Lin Sun, lingering in the void and easily dissolving and breaking these sword lights. Pu. There were still some sword lights that pierced into other places. Instantly, green light surged, causing the ground to melt, the forests to collapse, and a terrifying aura of destruction to arise. Kill! Jin Xiaoming became even more ferocious as he charged into the void, and his sword intent poured down like a tsunami. His peerlessly ferocious posture caused many people to tremble without end. But no matter how he charged, the tribulations appeared around Lin Sun, and he seemed to be invincible. Moreover, every single strike of his was powerful and all-conquering, causing Jin Xiaoming to be obstructed repeatedly and be utterly unable to approach Lin Sun. Jin Xiaoming was aggrieved to the point of almost going mad. Bang! Suddenly, Jin Xiaoming transformed into a golden serpent. Its body was an entire 3 kilometers long, covered in golden scales, and had dragon horns on its forehead. Its eyes were dark green, and when it opened its mouth, it seemed as if it could swallow the sun and the moon. A strand of boundlessly terrifying ferocious might suffused out along with it. When looked at from afar, it was simply like a golden dragon, and it was terrifying. Bang! The golden serpent swung its tail, and it seemed as if the heavens and the earth were collapsing. Its body coiled up like a golden sun that emanated boundless divine brilliance and a terrifying aura. My God! It actually forced out Jin Xiaoming's true body. The Golden King Serpent is an ancient and terrifying clan. In ancient times, it was ranked amongst the 100 ferocious beasts of the heavens and the earth. It could swallow an ocean with its mouth open and crush a mountain with a flip of its body. Everyone present was shocked and they couldn't remain calm. Lin Sun was fearless. He executed the Ice Drake steps and circulated the energy of the true dragon. In his days, he seemed as if he'd transformed into a true dragon that held its head high in the sky, and the might of a dragon suffused the air and awed the world. Rumble! Divine light erupted between them like dragons and snakes tearing at each other. Their combat strength collided, and they fought to the point the heavens and the earth dimmed and the sun and moon dimmed. Some scales fell from time to time, and they glowed green and were tainted with blood. At the same time, Lin Sun was shaken to the point of retreating from time to time. This caused him to be awestruck, as expected of a top figure. Even though Jin Xiaoming was extremely arrogant, his combat strength was extraordinary indeed. However, that was all. When Lin Sun circulated the Fury of Yazi and the Battle Saint technique to assist him in executing the 9 changes of the Calamity Dragon, he quickly showed an overwhelming momentum. Bang! 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 Streams of fist energy soared up like dragons, breaking through all obstacles and smashing on the body of the Golden King Snake, making its body twist in pain like a sieve. At the same time, its golden scales cracked and began to peel off, along with its flesh and blood. Too strong. Compared with his performance in the ranking of junior giants, Demon Lin seems to have been reborn. He's completely different now. Demon Lin must have benefited a lot from his closed-door training in the immortal secret realm. At the moment, there were sounds of admiration and shock on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. Jin Xiaoming was very dazzling, worthy of being an ancient freak. But Demon Lin was even more terrible, suppressing his opponent repeatedly. Go to hell. Suddenly, Jin Xiaoming roared and spewed out a green light beam from his mouth. Lin Sun was horrified. In just a moment, his defensive power was broken. If he hadn't moved his body in time, he would have been hit. Green snake flame. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. This was a kind of overbearing and vicious divine flame. It was the talent of the Golden King Snake. If he was hit by it, he would suffer great injuries. Whoosh! Subsequently, Lin Sun obtained a strand of the heavenly serpent flame during the battle, and under the circumstances that he didn't utilize the devouring star Dao, it actually corroded a hole in his skin and caused his flesh to be charred black. Idiot, how can you refine this kind of power? Jin Xiaoming said disdainfully. Obviously, he was very proud of the green snake flame. But in just a moment, he opened his eyes wide and saw the hole in Lin Sun's skin recovered in a flash. This Jin Xiaoming almost couldn't believe it. And this was the strength of the immortal way. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun rushed to the sky like a Luhan subduing dragons and tigers. With roaring light all over his body, he punched and kicked, completely suppressing the Golden King Snake's body. Its flesh and blood splashed, and its scales fell like rain. Jin Xiaoming howled in pain and struggled frequently, but it didn't help at all. Lin Sun had seen that Jin Xiaoming had exhausted his strength. It was meaningless to continue, so he no longer showed mercy. Next, Jin Xiaoming suddenly turned into a human figure and fought with his sword. but it was still in vain. He was completely suppressed by Lin Sun, and his injuries became more and more serious. It was also at this time that people knew how terrifying Demon Lin was. Many people had only heard of his name before, but hadn't seen it with their own eyes. That was why they were so shocked at this moment. Jin Xiaoming was an ancient freak with a fierce reputation. Before this, he had defeated many peerless figures of the present age. He was invincible and difficult to meet an opponent. But in Lin Sun's hands, it was not like dealing with an ancient freak at all. On the contrary, it was like suppressing a big snake. It was so easy and shocking. Demon Lin deserves to be called. During this period of silence, his combat power is obviously not the same as before. He can be called the top among the peerless giants in the ancient Desolation realm. Qi Chongdo sighed with emotion. He and Lin Sun had once been on the list of junior giant. But now it seemed that only a few months had passed, and Lin Sun had once again made an astonishing transformation, which made him feel that it was difficult to catch up. If it was him, he might not be Jin Xiaoming's opponent. At this time, other practitioners were like Qi Chongdo. Besides being excited, they couldn't help but sigh. Demon Lin's growth was really too fast. Compared with him, it would only be a blow to them. In the sky, Jin Xiaoming's body was badly mutilated, and his bones were broken. But his ferocity didn't change, and he seemed to be extremely strong. Bang! When he was defeated by Lin Sun again, he suddenly let out a long roar. A golden carriage rose into the sky, and the pattern of demons and gods appeared on it, and a colorful divine rainbow burst out. Jin Xiaoming's figure flashed, and he rushed into the carriage, intending to escape at an extremely fast speed. Lin Sun stretched out his hand and grabbed. The wordless pagoda appeared, and the dark golden light swept over lightly. The golden carriage rumbled and was suppressed, and then all the strange phenomena disappeared. Immediately after, Jin Xiaoming fell out of the carriage, and Lin Sun, who rushed over, grabbed him by the collar and completely restrained him. Jin Xiaoming was completely shocked. This golden carriage was a holy treasure, and it belonged to the Golden King's snake. It had boundless power, but now it was being suppressed. Jin Xiaoming was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and cold sweat broke out all over his body. He was in a complete panic. Demon Lin was too strong, and it made him feel despair. Plop! In the next moment, he was thrown halfway up the thousand-flow mountain. He lay there, unable to move at all. All the bones in his body were broken, and his whole body was stained with blood. At this time, everyone was shocked and their eyes were dull. Demon Lin's strength had once again shocked them. This kind of achievement, this kind of means, far surpassed his peers, and it could be said to be heaven-defying. Perhaps, only people like Yunqi Bai and Yan Zhanxiu would be able to match him in strength. Too strong. At the foot of the mountain, the practitioners were restless, and they were in an uproar. Lin Sun had been silent for several months, and now as soon as he appeared, he suppressed an ancient freak. This kind of achievement was enough to shock the world and cause the world to tremble. P.S. Say 3 things. First, there will be 10 updates on the 25th to repay everyone. Second, Zongheng has organized a monthly Rising Star lucky draw for Tianjiao battle. Every account has a free lucky draw every day, and the gifts are pillows, customized USB drives, t-shirts, thermos cups, notebooks, and so on. Children reading books in Zongheng can all have a lucky draw. Everyone should only draw for free, and don't draw for money. Chapter 1134. In recent times, ancient freaks had frequently appeared out of nowhere and roamed the world. Each of them was outstanding, and their limelight had completely overshadowed the talents of the present age. Until now, no one had defeated an ancient freak, and it could even be said that almost all of them were fated to be suppressed. But today, Demon God Lin, who had been silent for 2 months, had appeared out of nowhere and easily suppressed Jin Xiaoming, an ancient freak of the Golden King's snake lineage. The significance of this was too extraordinary. If the news got out, demon god Lin was destined to be crowned as the first ancient freak to be suppressed, and the whole world would pay attention to him. At this moment, the mountain and the foot of the mountain were all shaken and couldn't calm down. Everyone looked at Lin Sun with admiration and awe. Even the insufferably arrogant Jin Xiaoming had been suppressed, which was enough to make anyone exclaim in admiration. Alas, the limelight has been stolen. Old Toad heaved a long sigh, looking lonely. Alu patted him on the shoulder as if they were in the same boat and said, "It's okay. There will be many opportunities in the future." At this moment, Jin Xiaoming was confined and covered in blood and wounds as he lay on the ground. However, there was no fear, anger, or unwillingness on his face. On the contrary, he was unusually cold and calm. "I admit that I underestimated you before, but this is only a doppelganger of mine. If my original body came, it would be hard to say who would win," Jin Xiaoming said coldly. "A doppelganger?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Qi Chengdo and the others were a little surprised and doubtful. A doppelganger was so powerful? If what Jin Xiaoming said was true, then it was terrifying. Lin Sun, however, had a look of realization and said, "No wonder you're so weak. However, since your doppelganger is so weak, I don't think your original body is that strong." His words were casual, but it was completely different in everyone's ears. They all felt an invisible strength and domineering aura. Jin Xiaoming was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. He had thought that Lin Sun would be afraid, but who would have thought that this guy would have such a reaction? Lin Sun still regarded him as too weak and didn't take him seriously. This was undoubtedly a kind of contempt for his combat strength, and it was very direct and rude. "I heard that snake meat is also a great tonic. It can be boiled into snake soup, which is one of the world's delicacies. It's very good." Lin Sun looked Jin Xiaoming up and down, as if he was looking at a fine ingredient. Jin Xiaoming instantly felt a chill run down his spine as his jade-green pupils constricted rapidly, and he was completely unable to maintain his composure. This guy actually wanted to eat him? Jin Xiaoming was a bit stupefied. He was an ancient freak, yet now, he was treated as food. This was too great of a blow to his self-esteem. The others also had strange expressions on their faces. The rumors were indeed true. Not only was demon god Lin extremely courageous, but his appetite was also unparalleled. It was planning to eat the clone of an ancient freak. If word got out, who would dare to believe it? "You better not act rashly. So long as a trace of mishap occurs to my clone, my main body will surely charge over at the first possible moment." Jin Xiaoming's expression was livid as he spoke with a threatening tone. "Your main body is coming as well? That would be great. We can cook both the deity and the doppelganger together," Lin Sun said casually. "You!" Jin Xiaoming almost collapsed. This was the first time he had seen such a stubborn and overbearing character. He took a deep breath and said word by word, "Do you know that if you offend me, you will offend the golden heavenly snake lineage? Moreover, some ancient freaks that I once swore allegiance to won't let you off." "Noisy!" Lin Sun slapped him until he coughed up blood and several teeth fell off. "No matter who it is, no matter which ancient freak it is, they can't save you." All the cultivators present were trembling. Was demon god Lin declaring war? The world had been waiting for too long. They were all looking forward to peerless figures such as Yun Qinbai, Wang Xuanyu, Mi Hengzhen, Yi Move, Yan Zhanqiu, and Lin Sun to attack. Because the ancient freaks had been traveling around the world recently and had almost swept away all the contemporary heroes. This made the younger generation somewhat unable to raise their heads, and their hearts were filled with unwillingness. Many people were looking forward to the ancient freaks being defeated. "Lin Sun, you probably don't know how powerful the ancient freaks are. Our foundation is beyond your imagination, far better than that of the contemporary generation. There are countless peerless figures who have set foot in the reaching realm, and even some born saints and spiritual embryos. Jin Xiaoming's voice was gloomy. If you choose to be our enemy, I'm afraid you can't bear the consequences at all. Lin Sun sneered. You want to represent the ancient freaks in the world? You'd better shut up. Threats don't work on me at all. If you annoy me, I don't mind stewing you now. Jin Xiaoming's face was gloomy. He could feel that although Lin Sun's words were casual, he absolutely dared to do so. In fact, Jin Xiaoming's previous words still caused great waves and shocked all the cultivators present. There were countless peerless figures who had set foot in the reaching realm. If this was true, the overall strength of the ancient freaks was undoubtedly too horrible. I just want to remind you that some really horrible figures haven't shown their strength so far. Even if you are the best peerless figure in the present age, you can't be their opponent when the great era comes. Jin Xiaoming obviously restrained his words and dared not contradict Lin Sun, but there was still a hint of threat in his words. But to his disappointment, Lin Sun's expression didn't change at all when he heard these words, as if he didn't care about all this at all. Could this fellow really be a fearless devil god? Jin Xiaoming was a little discouraged. Seeing this, the cultivators present finally dared to confirm one thing, that Demon Lin, who had come out of silence, was no longer afraid of any so-called ancient freaks. They could even feel that Lin Sun was even looking forward to fighting with the strongest of those ancient freaks. In fact, it was not that Lin Sun was arrogant, but that he had developed an invincible and disdainful aura. He was fearless of everything, which could only be achieved when he was extremely strong. Lin Sun even dared to assert that no one who had reached his level would be afraid of fighting, nor would they be affected by some threats. Mi Hengzhen, who accepted the challenge of the ancient freak by Longting a few hours ago, must have such courage. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to accept such a challenge as the host of the Gathering of Thousand Streams. As for Jin Xiaoming, although he was an ancient freak, he was not as bold as Mi Hengzhen. After being defeated, he still threatened Lin Sun, hoping to frighten Lin Sun with the fame of others. This was enough to prove that in Jin Xiaoming's mind, even if he came in person, he might not be sure to win. Soon, the atmosphere on Thousand Streams' Spirit Mountain became lively again. Everyone discussed and communicated with each other with tea instead of wine, which was very harmonious. Lin Sun, Old Toad, and Alu also became the focus of the gathering. They were surrounded by many cultivators and chatted with each other like stars surrounding the moon. As for Jin Xiaoming, who was imprisoned on the ground, he was directly ignored. It's been so long. Why hasn't fellow practitioner Mi Hengzhen returned? Could it be? Someone spoke out worriedly. Mi Hengzhen was the host of this gathering. Now he went to fight with Bai Longting, but he didn't return. How could people not worry about him? Where's your real body? Why hasn't it come? I'm waiting to stew you all together. Lin Sun looked at Jin Xiaoming. Jin Xiaoming's face was extremely ugly, and he snorted. I'm not afraid to tell you that my real body is at 10 Mile Slope, watching the fight between Mi Hengzhen and Bai Longting. If you really have the guts, you can go there yourself. 10 Mile Slope. This was indeed the place where Mi Hengzhen and Bai Longting would fight. However, none of the cultivators present expected that Jin Xiaoming's real body was also at 10 Mile Slope. Obviously, his doppelganger had already confirmed that Mi Hengzhen was not there before coming to Thousand Streams' Spirit Mountain this time. Perhaps that was why he dared to make trouble so fearlessly. Where is 10 Mile Slope? Lin Sun asked Qi Chengdo. It's 16,000 miles away. Qi Chengdo suddenly realized something and said, Brother Lin, are you going there? Let's go and have a look. Lin Sun had made up his mind. Mi Hengzhen was really one of the most amazing figures in the world, and his fame was well known everywhere. And Bai Longting was a dazzling figure among the ancient freak. The fight between the two was also very attractive to Lin Sun. However, just as Lin Sun was about to take action, an ancient warship suddenly rushed over from the distant sky. The pattern of the sun and the moon appeared on the battlefield, and with bright light, it broke through the clouds and quickly approached. It's the warship of Sun Moon Palace. Senior brother Mi Hungjin is back. Chi Chongdo's eyes lit up and he was in high spirits. At the same time, everyone also saw a majestic figure standing on the warship. He was bathed in the sunlight and moonlight, and his style was extremely outstanding. Looking carefully, it was a handsome and elegant young man with wide sleeves and a wide belt. His eyebrows were wide and his forehead was smooth. Some people could tell at a glance that he was extraordinary and unique, just like Mi Hungjin, who appeared at this moment. However, before everyone could cheer, they saw a green divine rainbow behind the warship, tearing the void and approaching at an incredible speed. At the same time, Jin Xiaoming, who was imprisoned on the ground, was shocked, and a touch of joy burst out of his green eyes. Moreover, everyone noticed that the green divine ray of light was surprisingly controlled by a young man that was exactly similar to Jin Xiaoming. Without a doubt, this must be Jin Xiaoming himself. Fellow Taoist, you've been following me all the way. Do you also want to imitate Bai Longting and fight with me? In the sky, the warship stopped. Mi Hungjin suddenly looked back at Jin Xiaoming, who was rushing over. Humph, you think too much. My doppelganger is trapped on Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain. I'm here to see who dares to suppress me. Jin Xiaoming snorted coldly, and his voice shook the world like thunder. Mi Hungjin was stunned and seemed a little surprised. He said, "There's actually someone who can suppress your doppelganger on Thousand Streams Mountain? I'd like to get to know such an outstanding talent." His voice was filled with curiosity. Jin Xiaoming's face sank. He thought Mi Hungjin's words carried a sense of gloating. As they talked, they'd already arrived before Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain. And at this moment, Jin Xiaoming had already shouted, "Who dares to bully my doppelganger? Get out here!" Chapter 1135. Mi Hungjin's return made people feel at ease, no matter who won the battle between him and Bai Longting. The arrival of Jin Xiaoming's original body made Qianlu Spirit Mountain shrouded in a layer of gloomy clouds, causing everyone's heart to tremble. Too strong. As soon as he arrived, he revealed endless killing intent. "Get out!" The cold shout was still reverberating, causing the world to shake, the grass, trees, and rocks to crack, and the cultivators' eardrums to be almost torn and their qi and blood to surge. Jin Xiaoming's original body stood indifferently in the void, with a blood-red robe, golden hair, and green eyes. He was like a god of death overlooking the world. In fact, the moment he arrived here, he had already got in touch with his doppelganger and learned what had happened on Qianlu Spirit Mountain. In an instant, he fixed his green eyes on Lin Sun. At the same time, Chi Chongdo also told Mi Hungjin everything that had happened before. Then, Mi Hungjin also fixed his eyes on Lin Sun, with undisguised appreciation and curiosity in his eyes. Demon Lin. He had heard this name many times. When he saw Lin Sun today, he suddenly had a feeling that he was worthy of his reputation. Because Lin Sun dared to challenge an ancient freak so strongly, Mi Hungjin really had a good impression of Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun also felt the gaze from Mi Hungjin and Jin Xiaoming's original body. In the face of Jin Xiaoming's undisguised killing intent, Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged, and he glanced sideways at Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger confined on the ground. Then, he said, "Do you think that I didn't kill him because I didn't dare?" Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was originally overjoyed, thinking that he would be saved, but when he heard Lin Sun's words, he suddenly felt cold all over. At the same time, Jin Xiaoming's original body in the sky changed his expression, and he suddenly shouted, "How dare you!" Lin Sun smiled slightly and stretched out his hand to slap. Bang! The head of Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was directly smashed, and even a wisp of spirit in his body was erased. Clatter! A rain of blood sprayed. All the cultivators in the field were shocked, and their eyes widened in disbelief. Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was directly killed in front of him. Such methods were truly too domineering and shocking. Even Mi Hengzhen was slightly taken aback. Then, he couldn't help but laugh. There was surprise in his eyes, as well as admiration. On the other hand, Jin Xiaoming's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. Losing a clone didn't affect him too much, but a clone was killed right before his eyes, and it caused Jin Xiaoming to feel that it was an extremely great provocation. Boom! The aura around his body instantly became terrifying. His blood-red robe fluttered, and a dazzling green light rose and enveloped his entire body. "You are courting death." Jin Xiaoming spoke word by word while his golden hair fluttered, and his terrifying imposing aura caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to dim down, causing many cultivators to feel it was difficult to even breathe. Anyone could tell that the power of Jin Xiaoming's main body was far stronger than his clone. However, Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. He ordered casually, "Old Toad, dissect this dead snake. Alu, prepare a pot and cook a pot of golden king snake soup for all the people here." "Okay." Old Toad agreed readily. "Leave it to me." Alu patted his chest and said with a grin. You and you all have to die." Jin Xiaoming was so angry that green light burst out from his pupils. He couldn't restrain himself any longer and rushed down from the sky. As he waved his hand, a green divine rainbow that was as thick as a waterfall fell down. Boom! The void collapsed, and the green divine rainbow seemed to be invincible. "Do you want to kill me with my permission?" Mi Hengzhen's figure suddenly flashed, and his big hand drew and drew in the void, as if he was cutting yin and yang. A perfectly round pattern emerged, in which the sun and the moon were floating and sinking. The perfectly round pattern of the sun and the moon rotated slightly in the void, and then the green divine rainbow was obliterated, leaving not a single drop. Lin Sun's black eyes lit up. Mi Hengzhen's single strike showed his extraordinary combat attainment. He deserved to be one of the strongest figures in the present age. "Mi Hengzhen, you were seriously injured in the battle by Longting. Do you still want to fight with me?" Jin Xiaoming's face was gloomy. Seriously injured? Everyone was shocked and couldn't believe it. From the outside, they couldn't see any trace of injury on Mi Hengzhen. But Mi Hengzhen said indifferently, "This Thousand Streams grand meeting was initiated by me. As the host, even if I am injured, I can't watch my guests being bullied." His words were casual, but they revealed a sense of disdain and determination. He was elegant and handsome. He seemed to be a gentle person, but in fact, he had a peerless demeanor. Once he showed his sharpness, the world seemed to be dimmed. This was Mi Hengzhen, the leader of the younger generation of Sun Moon Palace, and also a great figure who had been famous for many years. His demeanor was really admirable. "So, if I want to kill this man, you won't stand by and do nothing?" Jin Xiaoming's face was livid and extremely cold. "Yes," Mi Hengzhen said without hesitation. "This time, your doppelganger came to Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain to make trouble while I was away, which is unforgivable. Now you dare to threaten to kill me. Do you really think that I, Mi Hengzhen, am a soft persimmon that can be pinched at will?" Qi Chongdo and the others were all excited, with admiration on their faces. Even Lin Sun had to admit that Mi Hengzhen deserved his respect for his courage and responsibility. However, respect was respect, and the matter was the matter. The next moment, Lin Sun rose into the air and said, "I'm waiting here to cook a pot of snake soup. Brother Mi, please let me kill this long worm." Long worm. Hearing such a title, everyone's expression was a little strange. So was Mi Hengzhen. He glanced at Lin Sun in a daze, as if he was shocked by Lin's courage. Then he laughed and said, "In that case, I won't do anything unnecessary." After that, he took the initiative to step aside. Ha 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 ha! At this time, Jin Xiaoming was so angry that he laughed. Since he was born, it was the first time for him to see someone who dared to blaspheme his dignity. Boom! He didn't want to talk nonsense at all and directly attack. He raised his hand and took out a bloody spear. The spear tore the void with a rumble, and the tip of the spear was like a dragon as it galloped towards Lin Sun. This spear was overbearing, ruthless, swift, and contained the terrifying power of the Great Way. As soon as the spear stabbed out, the bloody light shocked the world. It was indeed different from the combat strength of the doppelganger. In an instant, Lin Sun judged that the strength of Jin Xiaoming was much stronger than that of the doppelganger, and it brought great pressure to Lin Sun. However, this was exactly what Lin Sun wanted to see. Clang! The broken blade suddenly appeared in the void. It was as white as snow, illusory and resplendent, and a strand of the power of the great way of water covered it, showing an invincible sharpness. Lin Sun didn't use this treasure when he fought with Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger before. Bang! The broken blade and the bloody spear collided, and they instantly fought fiercely in the void. The saber light was like lightning, and the spear shadow was layer upon layer, breaking the clouds in all directions. Jin Xiaoming's pupils constricted. As soon as they fought, he'd realized how strong Lin Sun was, and he sobered up from his rage and started to attack with his full strength. He circulated the blood-red spear to the limit. Everywhere the tip of the spear pointed, numerous horrifying rifts were torn open in the void, and the sky was dyed blood-red. The furious howls of a bloody sea and the howls of ghosts and deities could be faintly heard, and its impetus was extremely shocking. The cultivators in the surroundings were dazzled by the sight of this, and all of them were unable to calm down. The formidableness of Jin Xiaoming's main body caused them to have the misconception that they were suffocating. Compared to him, his doppelganger was obviously much dimmer. It was no wonder that Jin Xiaoming dared to be so domineering. He was all alone and utterly unafraid of Mi Hengzhen, and he directly made a move on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain with the intention of crushing and killing demon god Lin to wash away the humiliation he suffered. Mi Hengzhen had a serious expression as he stared fixedly at the battlefield. He naturally discerned that Jin Xiaoming was formidable, and Jin Xiaoming was an overlord amongst peerless figures and wasn't formidable in the sense of the mortal world. He'd already made preparations to make a move at any moment. This Thousand Flow meeting was started by him, and Shao Qinghe, who invited Lin Sun this time, was his junior brother as well. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for him to allow the possibility of Lin Sun being killed to occur. But in next to no time, Mi Hengzhen noticed to his surprise that Lin Sun was actually at a complete disadvantage in the intense battle with Jin Xiaoming. Moreover, Lin Sun's combat strength was so formidable that it surprised even him. This kid is clearly of the same generation as junior brother Shao Qinghe, but his attainments in the peerless path of cultivation have obviously attained the peak level, and he's much more formidable than the former number 1 on the minor tycoon rankings. It's even to the extent that even if he participates in the star ranking competition of the 4 realms, it's sufficient for him to firmly take the first place. With Mi Hengzhen's knowledge and experience, he instantly determined that the combat strength Lin Sun possessed had long since exceeded the scope of a minor tycoon, and it caused him to be extremely amazed. No wonder junior brother Shao Qinghe admires and holds him in such high esteem. Such a figure is indeed one of the very few outstanding figures in the younger generation of the world. Mi Hengzhen sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. Strictly speaking, he, Wang Xuanyu, Yi Mouf, and Yan Zhanqiu could only be considered as veteran peerless figures. They'd made their debut early, and practically all of them were above the age of 30. But Lin Sun was different. He was still very young, and it had only been a few years since he came to the ancient desolation domain from the mortal world, yet he'd already become a renowned figure in the world. This seemed to be too extraordinary. If this kid participates in the great event this time, then perhaps we'll have a better chance of securing victory. Mi Hengzhen seemed to be lost in thought. Bang! A fierce battle continued to erupt beneath the sky. Lin Sun and Jin Xiaoming had already fought fiercely for a few hundred rounds, and they fought to the point the heavens and the earth were dim while the sun and moon dimmed, and the battle was extremely intense. Strictly speaking, the battle with Jin Xiaoming's main body could be considered to be the first time Lin Sun fought an ancient freak in the true sense of the word. As for Jin Xiaoming's clone, it seemed to be slightly insufficient in the end. Jin Xiaoming grew more and more shocked as the battle progressed, and his expression grew more and more solemn. He didn't dare underestimate Lin Sun any longer, and he took Lin Sun to be a formidable enemy of the world. On the other hand, Lin Sun grew more and more courageous as the battle progressed, and his black eyes burned with a surging battle intent. It couldn't be said to be an evenly matched match, and it was utterly impossible for them to appreciate each other. But Jin Xiaoming's formidableness really caused Lin Sun to be excited. After all, it was indeed too difficult for one to encounter an opponent that was worthy of a battle when one attained a cultivation like his. The thing that everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry was that such an unparalleled battle at the peak had drawn the attention of everyone present, yet there were two people that were different. One was Old Toad, and he was dissecting the body of a 3 kilometers long golden snake. His hands were tainted with blood, and he seemed like a butcher slaughtering pork with skilled movements while humming a tune. The other was Alu. He'd set up a campfire and a large iron wok, and he was boiling water with dexterous movements while waiting for the ingredients to enter the wok. This caused all the cultivators that noticed this scene to be speechless. These two fellows are really careless, and they aren't worried about demonic god Lin's safety in the slightest. P.S. I'm ashamed that the update has been delayed again tonight. How about this, if the normal 2 updates for this month aren't released after 11 p.m., then Jean you will release an extra chapter on the next day. Chapter 1136. Under the sky, Lin Sun dashed forward. The broken blade was like a dazzling bolt of lightning. It wasn't only fast, but it also emitted an all-conquering power. The more he fought, the stronger he became. Jin Xiaoming's expression was extremely solemn. Although the bloody spear was operated to the limit by him, and it was so powerful that every strike could easily kill a genius of the present age. But facing the attack of the broken blade, he was exhausted to resist. How could he be so strong? Jin Xiaoming was shocked and furious. His qi and blood surged all over his body. He couldn't believe that Lin Sun, who was just the first on the list of minor giants, possessed a combat strength that was sufficient to compete with the top giants. Lin Sun's fighting spirit burst out. His whole body was suffused with dazzling green divine light, and he pushed forward in the sky like a demon. Every single slash revealed boundlessly terrifying might. There was the scene of a myriad of stars falling. There was the scene of the moon filling the night sky and the sun illuminating the universe. There was the momentum of silence, and the world returning to silence. There was also the profundity of life and death in an instant. The 6 slashes of Tianyuan was deduced to the extreme by the truth of water, and its power was activated by the fury of the eye and the battle saint technique, causing the world to be filled with dazzling sharpness. Under such pressure, Jin Xiaoming was already faintly being suppressed. Not to mention launching a counterattack, even parrying seemed to be difficult for him, and his strength was insufficient. Clang! After a moment, after an earth-shattering collision, Jin Xiaoming's figure trembled as if he had been electrocuted, and then he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood while his face suddenly turned pale. Everyone was shocked. When Lin Sun suppressed Jin Xiaoming's clone before, it had already made their hearts tremble. Now, he actually seemed to have the strength to suppress Jin Xiaoming himself. Amazing! Mi Hengzhen's eyes lit up. Watching Lin Sun's battle caused his heart to be slightly restless, and his desire to fight was ignited. Boom! In the sky, Jin Xiaoming's expression was livid, and he didn't say a single word as he flicked his sleeve, causing the golden carriage that was originally confined on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain to suddenly soar into the sky, and it emanated 7-colored divine radiance that suffused the surroundings. Jin Xiaoming's figure flashed, and he stepped onto the golden chariot. In an instant, his whole body was covered by a sacred aura, and his power suddenly rose. Obviously, he wasn't fleeing, but using the chariot as a chariot to attack with all his strength. Bang! The broken blade attacked with a snow-white brilliance that was as bright as day. However, the Tao pattern diagram that appeared on the battlefield displayed the ancient 100 Perils diagram and easily neutralized this slash. On the other hand, Jin Xiaoming stood proudly on the treasured carriage with a cold expression as he said, "This carriage is a sacred object, and it's called the Vicious Cloud Carriage. It was refined from the souls of ancient vicious beasts, and it's branded with the markings of Saint Tao laws. Since you're able to force me to utilize it, you can die in peace." Everyone's hearts trembled and they gasped. The power of a holy treasure was different, but all of them could be said to be heaven-defying. A reincarnation development realm cultivator might not be able to unleash the true power of a holy treasure, but with just a portion of its power, it was enough to dominate the world. Rumble! The vicious cloud chariot galloped forward, crushing the void and rushing to Lin Sun. The vivid ancient vicious chariot appeared around Jin Xiaoming, and the aura of the divine Tao soared into the sky, making Jin Xiaoming look like a god of slaughter on the battlefield. Everyone's expressions changed, and they found it difficult to breathe. If Lin Sun didn't have a holy treasure, he was bound to feel that it was extremely tricky and even difficult to compete with it. However, it was obvious that this situation was not a problem for him. Buzz! The wordless pagoda soared into the sky, and the octagonal body of the pagoda glowed brightly like the sun. It sat in the middle of the sky and reflected the vast general trend. Instantly, the momentum of the vicious cloud chariot's charge forward was obstructed, and it was restrained by the wordless pagoda. Two different holy treasures emitted divine power in the void, and they fought with each other, causing the void there to collapse, and cracks that were thousands of meters long appeared. It was too gorgeous, and it was filled with a terrifying aura of destruction. It made one's scalp go numb just by looking at it from afar, and a chill ran down their spines. Clang! At the same time, Lin Sun had already charged again, and the broken blade was like a waterfall that slashed across the 9 heavens. In next to no time, Jin Xiaoming was unable to resist, and he was heavily injured and coughed up blood. Originally, he had placed his hopes on the vicious cloud chariot to kill Lin Sun, but never had he imagined that this treasure was actually firmly restrained by the wordless pagoda in Lin Sun's hand, and it was utterly unable to exert its power. Crack! It wasn't long before the broken blade emitted a terrifying murderous aura, and it cut off a section of Jin Xiaoming's blood-red spear. Moreover, it shook Jin Xiaoming to the point that he staggered and almost fell off the vicious cloud chariot. Bang! Subsequently, Lin Sun flashed and suddenly rushed to the front. The wordless pagoda above his head flowed with brilliance, firmly suppressing the vicious cloud chariot. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Jin Xiaoming's arm, as if he wanted to capture Jin Xiaoming alive. A series of actions happened in a split second, and it was extremely fast. Get lost! Jin Xiaoming was so shocked that his soul almost flew out of his body. He suddenly urged all his strength in an attempt to blow Lin Sun away. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun's palm and fingers were like iron hoop, and he suddenly operated the power of star obliteration and devour sky. The sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking followed. Jin Xiaoming's face changed dramatically. For the first time, he felt a fatal threat. Lin Sun's power was like an immeasurable abyss, and it seemed to swallow him whole. Puff! In an instant, his right arm was torn off, and a rain of blood sprinkled. Boom! At the same time, Jin Xiaoming let out a painful and furious roar. The vicious cloud chariot rushed up and instantly teleported him thousands of meters away. It was also at this time that the practitioners on and at the foot of the mountain reacted, and they immediately became restless. He tore off a right arm. Someone cried out involuntarily. Demon Lin is too strong. Many practitioners were scared out of their wit. In Lin Sun's hand, a broken arm was dripping with blood. It was torn off by him, and the wound was still gurgling with blood, which sprinkled in the void like a sad and beautiful rain of blood. Whoosh! Lin Sun casually threw the broken arm to Qianlu's spirit mountain. With a plop, it accurately fell into a big pot set up by a Lu. On the other side, Jin Xiaoming's face was distorted and ferocious, and his forehead was covered with sweat. His arm was torn off, which made him feel pain, but also unprecedented fear. It could be said that this was the most serious injury he had suffered since he was born. In the past, he had never suffered such a heavy setback. All the people present were boiling and shocked. Until today, an ancient freak is finally going to be defeated. Everyone realized that this was destined to be a sensational news. Jin Xiaoming had never been defeated since he was born. Before that, countless peerless figures were defeated by him. But today, such a turning point happened, which was like subverting their perception and cognition, and made everyone realize that ancient freaks were not invincible. Ah! Jin Xiaoming roared. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and he was about to go mad. He couldn't accept all this. Unfortunately, Lin Sun didn't intend to let him go. He took advantage of this opportunity to rush over and cut out the broken sword like a divine rainbow. In the end, Jin Xiaoming suppressed his grief, indignation, and humiliation, and drove the carriage of calamity to flee. He possessed special good fortune and opportunities, and after remaining silent until now, his cultivation had long reached the absolute peak. However, today, he was actually injured time and time again. This caused him to feel unwillingness as well as fear. He realized that if he didn't leave now, he would really die here. How could Lin Sun let him escape? He went all out and rushed forward. Bang! Jin Xiaoming's whole body shook violently, and a large amount of blood spilled. He was seriously injured, and his neck was almost cut off. Half of his body was broken. But in the end, he escaped and was taken by the carriage of calamity to break the void and flee in a hurry. Lin Sun was about to chase him, but Mi Hengjin had stepped forward and said, "Brother Lin, don't chase him. Even if you catch him, you can't kill him." Lin Sun also saw that the carriage of calamity was a holy treasure. If it wanted to take Jin Xiaoming away, it would be really difficult to stop it. But he was a little puzzled. Why can't I kill him even if I catch him? Mi Hengjin said, all ancient freaks have absolute means to save their lives. Even the old monsters of the king realm can't kill them. For example, the golden cicada jade talisman needed to escape, the life-saving talisman given by the sage, and some other means to save their lives. After a pause, he continued, after all, every ancient freak carries the hope of an orthodoxy or a tribe. It's impossible to kill them so easily. Lin Sun was a little unwilling, but he also knew that what Mi Hengjin said was true. He had learned from the old toad that ancient freaks were like frozen seeds, invested with the efforts of a great force. Such people were all 1 in a million geniuses. If they were killed, all the efforts of a tribe would be in vain and their hope would be shattered. Therefore, in order to prevent any accidents from occurring, these ancient freaks had hidden life-saving trump cards that no one knew about. It didn't take long for Lin Sun and Mi Hengjin to return to Thousand Streams Mountain. At this time, on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, there was already an uproar. Countless uproars and exclamations rose and fell like tides. Jin Xiaoming, a real ancient freak, not only was his doppelganger suppressed, but also his original body was severely defeated and finally fled in panic. Before this, no one had expected such an ending, and Lin Sun, who defeated Jin Xiaoming, suddenly became the focus of attention. He deserves to be the invincible Demon Lin. This exclamation resonated unanimously. Thinking of Demon Lin's past achievements and comparing them with today's victory, Everyone found that Demon Lin had never been defeated by his peers since he wandered around the world. This was incredible. From today on, the legend of invincible ancient freaks has been broken, and all this is thanks to Demon Lin. Many people felt a sense of pride and elation. Recently, contemporary practitioners in the world had been suppressed by those ancient freaks to the point that they couldn't even lift their head. There was a sense of depression in their hearts. Now they could finally release it. Thousand Streams Mountain was also bustling at this moment. Mi Hengzhen's return made Qi Chengdo and others feel like they had found their backbone. And the battle in which Lin soon defeated Jin Xiaoming made all the practitioners who participated in this gathering excited and honored. However, soon everyone was attracted by a tempting smell of meat. Many practitioners couldn't help swallowing their saliva secretly and looked at a big pot. The lively atmosphere in the field was suddenly changed. Alu was boiling snake soup, and within the large wok were pieces of jade white and crystalline snake meat that were boiling and bubbling while emitting the fragrance of meat that suffused the surroundings. The smell seemed as if it could penetrate the soul, and it caused one to be utterly unable to hold back. Even Lin Sun wiped his saliva without a trace and said in surprise, "It seems to taste a little better than the black nightmare dog meat."